Unaware of what Don was thinking, Samantha turned her attention to the tub and leaned in to feel the water. Don watched her do this, and once again he couldn't help but let his eyes focus on the rear, which looked even more apparent in the towel Samantha was wearing. "The water seems just fine." "What do you think, Donnie?" she asked without bothering to look back. Yeah, it's just perfect." A broken bar, Don muttered, choosing to turn his gaze away before his thoughts could wander in a dangerous direction and cause his body to react. "How do I even go about this? Do I just try or our broken bar number?" "Things have been going well so far and our relationship is definitely improving. This isn't a game, so if I'm serious about this I can't mess it up. My approach needs to be methodical." After taking a moment to consider the situation, Don decided against making any overly bold moves, as he understood this wasn't something he could simply rush into. Having received confirmation from Don, Samantha turned to face him with a smile and gestured him toward the tub. "All right then, get your boxers off and I'll help you climb in." "Huh?" Don was slightly surprised to hear that even his boxers had to be removed. Samantha took his reaction for not wanting to inside. "Come on, Donnie, you don't really expect to wash in those, do you? I'm your mother. I've seen you in your birthday suit more times than I can count. Would you be more comfortable if I closed my eyes?" "I'd be more comfortable if I wasn't the only one naked, but I can't really say that now, can I?" Don inwardly sighed, but he chose to try something. "Well, I was comfortable at first because I thought you came wearing something under the towel you could get wet in while helping me wash in my briefs." Don knew that by wording it this way, he was at least not blatantly asking her to get naked. Rather, he was expressing that he was initially comfortable because he thought they'd be both mildly dressed. "Oh," Samantha gave a knowing look as she understood what Don was trying to say, not even suspecting that there were any ulterior motives behind his words. She lowered her gaze to look at her towel and placed her hand on the upper part of it before replying, "I was just planning to take a bath after I was done helping you. I'm only wearing my undies under this, Donnie," she explained. "Well, it was worth a try," Don thought, choosing not to push his luck as he gave a nod. "Oh, then it's all right then," Don replied before turning to face the tub. Samantha looked at him and sighed. He must be really uncomfortable with this. "I guess it's not the same since he's older, but I'm still his mother, so broken bar." Having reached her own conclusion, Samantha cleared her throat and nervously suggested, "You may broken bar if it makes you more comfortable. I can also undress. It'll be like old times when you and Summer still joined me for baths." "Would that be better?" "Is she serious?" Don couldn't believe what he was hearing, but he felt the urge to immediately yell yes. However, he stopped himself from doing so. As great of an opportunity this was, it could still be fumbled if he reacted or spoke wrongly. After all, Samantha was clearly still approaching the whole interaction as a concerned mother trying to help her son, no matter what. From her perspective, it likely wasn't that big of a deal, if not a little bit awkward for them both. But it was better to both feel a bit awkward and Don alone. In response, Don acted a bit unsure. The best way to diffuse awkwardness like this was with humor, just like when he was convincing Samantha to try on the dresses at Mikasa. So he showed her a smile and scratched his head. "I don't think you and I can both fit in the tub, Mum." Samantha couldn't help but smile back and shake her head. "Oh, you know I don't mean exactly like old times, Donnie. Do you really not want me to help you bath that bad?" "I can ask your aunt if you prefer." Don saw another opportunity to lighten the mood, and so he quickly shook his head and cut her off, saying, "No way, Aunt Amanda will definitely use this chance to poke fun at me and make weird jokes." Samantha chuckled at Don's reaction and nodded in agreement. "She definitely might tease you a bit about it." "Or do you maybe want to try your luck with Summer?" Don showed a disgusted expression and shook his head. "I'd rather stay dirty than even try asking her for help with that." "Oh, don't be mean, Donnie. She's still your sister and I'm sure she'd be more than willing to help if you asked." "Nope, not doing it." "Fine, you win. Let's go with your way." "Why do I feel like you only brought up Aunt Amanda and Summer to try and convince me?" Don narrowed his eyes at Samantha and gave her a suspicious look, trying to jokingly accuse her of steering the situation back to what she suggested. By at least doing this, He agreed to her suggestion in an unawkward way that Samantha didn't even pay any mind to. After all, to her, she finally convinced Don to agree. She laughed at his claim and brought both hands over to her chest, looking ready to remove her towel. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Now can we please hurry? The water is getting cold. After saying this, Samantha leaned in so she could help Don remove his boxers. She chose to stand behind him as she did this to avoid any awkwardness. Because mother or not, she too felt anxious doing this. Don could feel her gentle hands tickle his skin as grabbed the edges of his boxers and began to lower them. She was a bit quicker than when she was lowering his pants but still proceeded with caution to avoid causing Don any pain. Man, this feels weird. Don couldn't deny the sense of awkwardness he felt by standing buck naked in front of Samantha. There, that wasn't so hard now, was it? Samantha questioned as she pulled her hands away from Don and brought them over to her chest, casually unwrapping her towel before letting it fall to the ground. Unaware of this, Don turned his head to reply, I suppose. However, before he could finish his sentence, he was met with stunning sight of Samantha standing in only her underwear. Don stood there without uttering a word for a few seconds as he fully took in Samantha's figure. The light blue lace panties she wore hugged her body tightly and really showed off just how curvy she was. But Don's attention was mostly on her breasts, which looked even more enticing in the flesh. Despite their size, they were well-shaped, even without the support of a bra, and didn't hang loosely. As for her nipples and the surrounding area, they were a light pink color. Even without her glasses on, Samantha could see that Don was staring at her chest, and so she raised one hand to cover them horizontally, mainly just hiding her nipples. Donnie, it's rude to stare a broken bar. Shit. Her words made Don realize his blunder and he immediately turned away. Sorry, Mum. You just a broken bar caught me off guard. There, you a broken bar bigger than I remember. Don couldn't really find the right words to diffuse the awkwardness he created by staring at her breasts. Thankfully for him, Samantha didn't seem to mind as she showed a smile and let out a small chuckle. That's all right, Donnie, I'm a bit used to guys staring at my chest, unfortunately. Right, with how many guys she must catch staring, she's probably not too fazed by me doing it. Still, the last thing I need is for her to think I'm like other guys. Don gave an understanding nod and came up with an excuse. I'm sure they just stare because you're beautiful, Mum. For me, a broken bar, it's just a broken bar. Well, a broken bar, it's kind of embarrassing, Don cryptically replied, trying to lure her into asking more. As his mother and a woman, Samantha couldn't help but become curious as to what Don was trying to say. What is it? You know you can tell me anything, Donnie. I'm your mother, I'd never judge you, no matter how embarrassing. To truly sell his act, Don placed his hand at the back of his neck and began to rub it in a nervous manner as he said, I don't know, Mum, it's really something I'm insecure about and I don't want you to laugh. I would never laugh at your insecurities, Donnie. I'm your mother. If anything, I might be able to help you overcome it. If not your mother, then who else? But if you're not comfortable enough sharing it now, I understand. Just know I'm always ready to listen, Samantha softly reassured Don, placing her free hand on his shoulder and giving it a light tap. After his initial blunder, Don knew that to properly remedy the situation and even improve his relationship with Samantha, he needed to create a special circumstance, like a secret only he and her knew about. And what better secret to have than one that involved an insecurity? Because for someone to share an insecurity, especially one they seemed so adamant to hide, it showed a deep level of trust. And that was what Don was trying to do, despite said insecurity being a lie. Now that Samantha had reassured him, he let out a fake sigh and took a deep breath, trying to paint the picture that it was really hard for him to say. After doing this, he turned his head to look at Samantha but avoided eye contact and just looked to the side. This was to fake being nervous as he revealed, well, you see, yeah, broken bar, I'm never actually been with a girl a broken bar intimately. It's why I was nervous about you bathing me. It's just a broken bar, you're beautiful, and also I was worried my body might react and weird you out. A broken bar, it's the last thing I want after finally getting you back into my life. Don's lie was believable enough on its own, but thanks to his honeyed word straight making his lies 10% more believable to those with 50% or higher trust in him, it was completely believed by Samantha. Oh Donnie, his words made her feel emotional as she interpreted them as him doing his absolute best to keep her in his life. She couldn't but lunge forward and suddenly hug him! Don was caught off guard by that action. To suddenly have her large breasts pressed against him was something he didn't see coming. The warmth and softness of her body felt otherworldly and Don's body reacted accordingly. This time it was Samantha's turn to be surprised as felt Don's growing cock press against her panties. Is that he's a broken bar? Oh no, that was what he was trying to avoid, a broken bar. Rather than being put off by it, Samantha was instead careful of how she reacted. Don had just revealed that it was an insecurity of his, so she knew if she acted startled and suddenly pulled away that it may hurt him. Don's cock became fully erect and was tightly pressed against Samantha's soft lacy underwear. Shit, she can definitely feel my hard-on. But she hasn't backed away yet. A broken bar, how do I play this? Don inwardly relaxed a bit since Samantha didn't pull back or react to his sudden erection. After pondering his next move for a few seconds, he took action by pulling away from Samantha and turning around, as if he was trying to hide his erection. Sorry Mum, that was exactly what I was trying to avoid, damn it. Don spoke in a self-judging manner and let out a sigh while shaking his head. Samantha couldn't see through his acting at all and genuinely thought he was embarrassed and upset. Oh Donnie, she called out softly and reached out to hold him by the shoulder, no longer bothering to hide her breasts as her entire focus was on her son. You have nothing to be sorry for. It's a perfectly normal reaction to have as a healthy young man. Let's not drag this out. The fact she hasn't freaked out so far is amazing. I can build on this with time. Don felt this was adequate foundation to build their relationship on, and so he didn't see any reason to push beyond this for now. As tempting as it was, he reminded himself that she was still doing all this as a concerned mother and nothing more. To truly go somewhere with her, he needed to make her develop some temptations of her own toward him, a difficult but not impossible task. I guess you're right. Can we just get on with the bath? I don't think now is the time to talk about my problem. Don turned around to face Samantha again, but this time he kept his gaze on her face while rubbing his neck in a nervous manner. Samantha nodded in understanding and also kept her gaze focused on him. She didn't want to push him too far as she felt it was likely already hard for him to tell her his insecurity. Of course Donnie, just climb into the tub. Let me get the cloth and soap. Samantha turned toward a nearby stand next to the tub that had various bathing items on it and picked out a bar of soap and a cloth. While she did that, Don slowly lowered himself into the water until it was up to his chest. His heart was currently pounding from the interaction he and Samantha just had. I can't believe that actually happened. This all feels so surreal. A broken bar, but I can't relax. A broken bar, at least not yet. As wonderful as it felt to make progress with Samantha, Don didn't let it distract him from the bigger picture. The world was dangerous, and without strength, he couldn't protect and keep what was his. A broken bar or take what wasn't. What was initially a crazy goal now began to seem possible for Don, so long as he was willing to put in the work. As Don sat in the tub, Samantha began rubbing his body down with the cloth she soaked in the water. She carefully rubbed, pressed and massaged his muscles, causing him to groan in pain every now and then. The same process was done for his legs, back and chest. Only then did she lather up the soap and help him wash up. How do you feel now, Donnie? She asked as she began rinsing him off. A lot better, thanks. Don was just inwardly glad that he managed to get through the situation without any more awkwardness arising. At the very least she doesn't seem to mind being half naked in front of me. Then again, she could just be enduring it for my sake. Don didn't want to jump to any conclusions, but he felt the former was more likely. And if that was truly the case, then it would make things a bit easier for him going forward. For now though, he continued to act casual as he stepped out of the tub and Samantha wiped him down. Goodness, he's so fit. Is it because of his time in prison? Samantha couldn't help but wonder. After practically feeling him out everywhere, his physique was imprinted in her mind. Not wanting to make things awkward though, She chose not to mention it and instead just pulled away after she was done wiping him dry. "There, all done." "That wasn't so bad now, was it?" she jokingly asked with a smile, trying to keep the mood light as she wrapped the towel around Don's waist for him. Don smiled back and nodded. "I guess not. I don't even feel that sore anymore. My arm still feels kind of stiff though." As Don said this, he began stretching his limbs and flexing his muscles to show that it helped. He wasn't sure if the massage really helped that much or if it was just his basic regeneration at work. "I also need to get a better idea of my powers." I guess that paramedic knew what he was saying. "I'm glad you're starting to feel better. But still, try not to stress yourself until we're sure you're fully injured." "I won't, Mum. Anyway, I'll leave you to have your bath now." Don tightened his towel and turned to leave. Samantha smiled and gave him a nod before adding, "If you have any problems dressing up, just wait for me to finish my bath and I'll come to help you, all right?" Don paused by the door and looked back at Samantha, who was still wearing nothing but her panties. "I think I'll manage, Mom, thanks." After saying that, he walked out and heaved a sigh, thinking to himself, "She's really not making this easy." Shortly after stepping out of the bathroom, Don made his way to his room and didn't linger in the hallway. Upon opening his door and entering though, he came to a halt and couldn't help but shake his head at the sight that awaited him. Trixie was currently positioned by his bed, a broken bar, or rather under it, as her upper half was under while her rear was slightly elevated just outside it in a doggy position. Once she heard the door swing open, she began to move her petite plump ass side to side as while fidgeting as if she were trying to break free. "Oh no, a broken bar, I'm stuck. I sure do hope no one takes advantage of little ole me while I'm like this. I totally wouldn't enjoy that at all." "Seriously?" Don muttered as he closed the door and just let out a sigh in reaction to Trixie's antics. But Trixie continued to pretend. "Don, is that you? Can you please help me out? I was looking for porn mags and I ended up stuck." I can't tell if she's just fooling around or genuinely thinks that would work. "Yay, I don't even want to know the answer to that." Don just ignored Trixie's pleas and walked over to his wardrobe where he began to dress up. Hearing his footsteps walking away from her direction, Trixie pouted and came out from under the bed before looking at Don with her arms crossed. "Gee, thanks the help." Don met her gaze and replied sarcastically, "You're very welcome. Glad I could be of help." TSK. Trixie clicked her tongue in disappointment before her figure vanished and then reappeared on the bed in a relaxed posture, her tail playfully moving around. "Anyway, how'd the sexy time with Mommy go? Should I be expecting a little Don running around anytime soon?" she asked with a grin. "I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you," Don replied as he began applying lotion on his body. "Oh come on, my senses tell me something happened." "Spill the juicy details. What went down?" Trixie's smile grew wider and she began moving her tail more excitedly. "Does she really have senses like that, or is she just saying that?" "Well, doesn't matter, I might need her help with it anyway, so there's no harm in telling her." Don thought before nodding at the question. "Not Mika broken bar." Don went on to reveal what had happened in the bathroom between him and Samantha. However, he made sure to leave out his role in bringing out the situation and the thought process he used. If he told Trixie that, it was no better than telling her how he approached situations, which would make her immune to his plans and tactics. Because even if she couldn't guess what he was planning, she would have that mentality that he may be scheming something and thus be on guard. Trixie listened intently to the details, none of which he exaggerated. Once he was done, Trixie sat up from her laid posture and leaned forward with excitement. "That sounds so hot, I wish I never left and just watched." Don gave a shrug and tried to act a bit disappointed as he said, "Well, nothing big happened in the end, so it doesn't matter. She just sees me as her son." By downplaying the situation and acting like he failed, Don hoped he would make Trixie want to help him. As much as he didn't know a lot about Trixie, one thing he knew for sure was she loved being a part of and/or initiating sexual encounters. Don's gamble proved to be correct, as not only did Trixie look willing, she seemed excited, very excited. Her tail waved side to side like a puppy and her figure soon vanished from the bed before reappearing right in front of him. "Yes, it matters," she argued while looking up at Don, her eyes practically glimmering from excitement. If she was willing to go that far, it means there's hope to go even further. You just need a little help from yours truly. That worked better than I thought. Am I really that good at reading people, or does it have to do with my traits and abilities? Considering the success Don was having with his predictions, he couldn't help but wonder about this. Whatever the case, he now became more confident in himself when it came to interacting with others. Keeping the momentum going, Don gave Trixie a skeptical look and asked, "And how exactly do you plan on helping?" Trixie parted her lips and was about to answer, but stopped herself in the last minute before lowering her gaze and focusing on Don's towel. "If I'm going to help you with your mom, I'm going to need a little motivation of my own. Besides, us succubi can't work to our fullest when we're virgins." A broken bar. Don could already see where Trixie was going with this, and he didn't really have any problem with it, especially after his interaction with Samantha left him blue-balled. But before he could jump at the offer, Don quickly considered a few things. "Well, I don't really have much time to go all the way with her. Plus I don't want to come across as too eager. I need to maintain the upper hand when it comes to her." So broken bar. After thinking this, Don raised his head and pretended like he was carefully considering the matter. This caused Trixie to pout and cross her arms. "Oh come on, what's there to think about? Any other guy would have jumped at the offer to pop my cherry, you know." Don didn't doubt Trixie at all, but for her to go so long without having done it already meant that for whatever reason, she had her eyes on Don, and he was going to fully take advantage of that. After she complained, Don lowered his gaze and eyed her up and down. She was still wearing the tight black top and jean shorts that made her look very sexy while highlighting her petite figure. "Fair enough," he nodded in agreement, causing Trixie's eyes to light up. But before she could celebrate, Don went on to add, "But I don't have much time right now. So how about we put that mouth of yours to use instead and save that cherry popping for later?" Trixie didn't even take time to consider and immediately nodded, "Deal." Before reaching out and pulling Don's towel off, revealing his nude figure. Before Don could even say anything in response to Trixie, she already crouched down and lined her face in front of his cock. "Let's get you up," she muttered excitedly while licking her lips. In the next moment she brought her hands forward, using one to grip the shaft of Don's cock while using the other to fondle his balls. Don's body reacted quickly and his cock began to grow erect right in front of Trixie, who watched it with eager anticipation. Well hello big boy," she teasingly whispered as she began to move her hand up and down Don's shaft, stroking it slowly. "Damn, her hands are so soft." A broken bar. Don showed a pleasured expression in response to Trixie and brought his hand forward to caress her hair near her horns. As he was doing this, he accidentally traced his thumb against them and got an unexpected reaction from Trixie. !! Trixie's entire body seemed to jolt and she let out a cute moan. She also tightened the grip with which she held Don's cock. "Wow, she's really sensitive there," Don quickly realized and adjusted his hand so he could keep stroking her horn lightly with his thumb while the rest of his fingers rested on her hair. ! Be gently broken bar. Trixie moaned and showed a small smile as she looked up at Don with a submissive look before adding, "I'm very sensitive there." After saying this, she licked her lips and lowered her head again to focus on Don's cock, specifically the tip. "How would you like it if I teased your sensitive spot?" she whispered while leaning in closer to his cock. Without saying anything else, she accumulated a bit of saliva in her mouth before opening it and letting the saliva fall onto the tip of Don's cock in a slimy trail. Once the saliva landed on the tip, she stroked her hand upward and began to spread it out evenly. Don groaned in pleasure as he felt Trixie lubricating his cock with a mix of his own pre-cum and her saliva. Trixie was busy stroking his cock with her natural lubricant. She couldn't help but ask, "How does it feel making your cock nice and slippery?" Don looked down at Trixie and smiled while still teasing her, occasionally making her squeal out, "Feels great." "Are you sure you've never done this before?" Trixie couldn't help but giggle at the question. She applied even more saliva to his cock, slightly increasing the pace with which she began to stroke it. "I've had enough mental practice, you could say." "My kind is naturally gifted at this sort of thing," she teasingly answered, occasionally moaning from having her horn teased. "You're starting to make me feel so horny," she muttered as she pulled her hand away from Don's balls and brought it over to her own crotch, which she began to rub gently using 2 fingers through the jean shorts she was still wearing. "Oh yeah, that feels so good." This is so strange, but she really seems super sensitive, Don thought, surprised at how much effect rubbing Trixie's horn was having on her. Seeing this, he chose to capitalize on it and focused his entire hand on one of her horns, holding it firmly. Trixie let out a loud moan, her body jolting once again. "Hey, not so rough," she complained, looking up at Don with a pouty face. Don looked down at her and forced a smile. "Sorry, I'll be gentle." Trixie let out a cute hum and narrowed her eyes at Dawn as she leaned closer to his cock, pressing its entire length against the side of her face while still stroking it. "Your cock is almost as long as my head from the chin to the forehead," she murmured. "I wonder how deep I can take it into my mouth," Trixie teasingly asked, tilting her head slightly and sticking out her tongue. She licked Don's cock from the base all the way up to the tip, coiling and licking as she went. "Lick, you taste so good." "I can't help but want a bigger bite," she commented, giving the tip a light kiss before opening her mouth and wrapping her tongue around it, licking and slurping on it like it was a lollipop. "Oh yay," Don groaned out, finding immense pleasure from Trixie's teasing actions. He decided to reciprocate by rubbing her horn with his thumb and index finger while keeping the rest of his hand rested at its base. "Oh, fuck," she moaned out, momentarily breaking her tongue away from the tip of his cock before leaning forward and taking it into her mouth again. Samantha's voice interrupted from outside the door. "Donnie?" she called. Don immediately snapped his head in the direction of the door, looking at Trixie with concern. She, however, looked completely carefree and gave him a little wink. She whispered, "Well, aren't you going to answer?" Don turned his attention back to the door and answered, "Yeah, I'm dressing up." "Oh, I was just checking to see if you needed any help," Samantha asked, her voice filled with concern. Trixie turned her attention back to Don's cock and, without hesitation, took it back into her mouth. Don couldn't help but groan out a bit louder, not expecting the sudden wet warmth of her mouth. His groan, however, was mistaken for one of pain, as Samantha worryingly asked, "Donnie, are you okay?" "If you're still in pain, I can help you dress up," she offered, but Don immediately refused. No, really, I'm fine. I just stubbed my toe against the bed frame." After saying this, Don immediately looked down at Trixie with narrowed eyes, but her focus was completely on his cock. She hungrily began to suck, taking half of it in and out of her mouth in a sloppy manner, while she also touched herself. "What's that sound, Donnie?" Samantha proceeded to ask, hearing low, muffled noises she couldn't quite make out. "It's my phone speaker," Don quickly replied. "I was playing some music but I left it on the bed and the blanket's muffling it." Samantha couldn't really argue with the reason, but in her mind she still thought that maybe Don was trying to hide his pain. Seeing as he wasn't willing to allow her in, she didn't press the matter. "All right, well, I'm going to get dressed as well. Hurry up so you can have something to eat and maybe some painkillers if you're still feeling sore. If you're not done by the time I am, I'm coming to help you, mister." "I won't take no for an answer," Samantha insisted. Don wondered if she was serious, but on the surface, he didn't argue. "Sure thing, no problem." After replying, he could hear Samantha's steps moving away from the door. Trixie still looked completely carefree and just grinned at Don, saying in a muffled way, as she still had his cock in her mouth, "Looks like we need to hurry up." After saying that, she took it out and continued to stroke it with one hand while using the one she'd been touching herself with to lift her top and reveal her small, perky breasts. "But I wanted to play so much more. I guess I'll just have to take my meal to go." Trixie proceeded to give her nipples a playful pinch before lowering her hand back down to her crotch, this time sliding her fingers into her jeans rather than on them. After doing that, she looked up at Don with expectant eyes and asked, "I want you to be a bit rougher and fill my face, silly. I want to feel you blasting your hot cum down my throat." More than happy to entertain Trixie's request, Don held onto her horn more tightly within the entirety of his grasp before roughly thrusting his cock forward into her mouth. Trixie let out a loud, muffled moan mmfph, and her entire body seemed to tremble from Don suddenly grabbing her horn fully. She quickly raised one hand and held Don's wrist, trying to pull it away from her horn, but it didn't budge. He simply looked down at her and said, "If you want me to stop, just tap my thigh twice." Until then, Don trailed off, then suddenly thrust again, pushing the entirety of his cock into her mouth and down her throat. Cough glurk. Trixie coughed slightly from the suddenness of the action, and a mix of spit and drool could be seen coming out of the corners of her mouth. Despite this, she still didn't tap Don's thigh. Instead, with her eyes looking a bit dazed, she lowered both her hands and put them behind her back. Don took that as a green light, he thought, before taking it a step further and grabbing onto her horn with his other hand. Trixie let out another muffled moan mmfph, and her body trembled yet again. This time it was more than just a jolt of surprise, and Don couldn't help but ask, "Did you just come?" Trixie looked up at Don with her dazed eyes but didn't answer. Instead, she simply began to bob her head forward and back weakly, as if urging him to start thrusting again. Don showed a small smile and proceeded to do just that, grabbing onto her horns more firmly before he began thrusting forward and back roughly. Glurk exclamation mark tilde slurp glork. The sloppy sounds of Trixie's mouth getting fucked resonated in the room, and she took it without complaint, letting her petite body be used in any way Don wished, while still firmly keeping her hands behind her back. Her mouth feels amazing, Don thought to himself as the soft, wet texture of her mouth and throat was unlike anything he'd ever felt. Every time his cock was thrust into her mouth, she would move her tongue around it and tease it. When it went down her throat, she would tighten it, causing Don to feel more of the fleshy texture around his cock. Don couldn't help but to intensify his hold and leaned forward slightly as he began to pound Trixie's mouth from a slightly angled posture. To prevent herself from falling to the ground, Trixie placed both her hands down on either side to keep herself balanced, though now her entire upper body was slightly inclined back as Don fucked her mouth thoroughly. Glork triple A. The mix of drool and saliva running down the corners of her mouth had become so much that it now soaked her top, making it visibly wet. Her nipples had also become visibly quite hard, and the crotch area of her jeans also looked moist. Feeling himself reaching his limit, Don decided to take his cock out of Trixie's mouth to give both himself and her a break. Once he took it out, he looked down at her, panting slightly. Huff huff huff. Trixie coughed slightly and began to breathe heavily as she tried to catch her breath. Don remained standing in front of her and even had his throbbing, sloppy wet cock pressed against her face. Trixie looked at it out of the corner of her eye and even stuck out her tongue while still catching her breath, as if wanting it back inside her mouth already. She's like a porn star, Don thought. Having never been with a woman in such an intense way in his former life, it felt like he was living out the dominant fantasy some men wish to have over their women, especially when it came to sex. Don, who still held her horns, removed his hand from one of them and made her tilt her head by pulling back on the other. Once her head was slightly tilted up, Don rested his cock on her tongue and began to thrust it, gliding it against the surface. Trixie held the position and allowed Don to use her tongue in that way. While he did this, she moved her hands from her back and brought them to her front, unbuttoning her jeans and lowering the zip to reveal the cute black thong that she wore. She then held out two fingers before sliding them both into her pants. Don continued to glide his cock against her tongue for a bit longer before pulling it away. He was still not fully recovered and began to feel a bit numb from standing so long while thrusting, so he turned his attention toward the bed, and without saying a word, he guided Trixie toward it by tugging on her horn. She didn't dare to protest, simply letting out a moan in response and biting her lip as she crawled in a sultry manner toward it. Once at the edge of the bed, Don lifted Trixie and had her bend over along the edge. He then reached for her jean shorts and pulled them off, revealing her pucky, rounded ass, which he proceeded to give a light smack. Trixie let out a cute yelp, and her entire body seemed to jolt. but she wasn't at all against this action. Almost immediately after, she began to wiggle her ass left and right, as if asking for more. Don was more than happy to oblige, but he made sure to keep the smacks light, as he didn't want anyone overhearing them and coming to check what was going on. After giving her ass a few more light smacks Don lifted Trixie yet again and threw her onto the bed. He then had her turn so that her head was at the edge while the rest of her body was spread along the surface. With her head now on the edge, Trixie already had a good idea of what was coming, and she opened her mouth in anticipation, ready to welcome Don's cock back inside. Don didn't immediately place his cock into her mouth. Instead, he simply stood over her, bringing both hands toward her exposed chest, where he pinched her nipples with either hand and began to twist and pull them. Trixie let out a moan, arched her back, and curled her toes in response to the action. However, she chose to keep her mouth busy as she leaned upward and began to lick Don's balls in circular motions. Slurp slurp slurp, the sounds echoed as Don let out a groan himself. He then let go of one of her nipples, sliding his hand down her tummy and toward her crotch. Feeling his fingers coming down, Trixie spread her legs for him, allowing him to easily slide his 2 fingers into her panties. Don could immediately feel the wetness of her soft folds. He placed his fingers between them and began to rub up and down, feeling the tightness and wetness around his fingers. Trixie began to moan more loudly, bringing one of her own hands to play with the nipple Don had let go of. At this time, Don decided to move his lower body back a bit to position his cock over Trixie's mouth. She opened her mouth wide to welcome it, and Don slowly slipped it in. From this position, it was much easier for his cock to find its way into her throat. Trixie held back, coughing and gagging as more saliva began to escape from the corners of her mouth, trailing down her face. Once Don's cock was fully inside her mouth, he could even see its bulge on her neck. The tightness he felt was unreal, and he couldn't help but hesitate to go rough from the get-go. In this position, he started with slow, steady strokes while still rubbing 2 of his fingers against her folds. However, Trixie moved her hands and held Don by his thighs, trying to pull him in closer as if urging him to go faster. Don quickly got the memo, but before doing that, he decided to slip one of his fingers into her pussy. "You Hilda!" Trixie let out a loud moan in response, while Don was amazed by how tight she felt with just a single finger. He couldn't help but wonder how it would feel to have his cock inside her. That mental image alone was enough to make his cock throb in action, which Trixie felt in her throat, causing her to arch her back a little bit and gag slightly. Glurk! Before Trixie could even adjust, Don chose to become rougher. He no longer simply pinched her nipple with one hand but instead fully grabbed onto her breast, using it almost as leverage as he began to roughly fuck Trixie's mouth and throat again. Slurp glurk glork glork. The slurping, gurgling noises resonated through the room. Don's gaze alternated between the bulge he saw appearing on her neck and her crotch, where he continued to finger her with a single digit. Inaudible sounds escaped Trixie's mouth as Don continued to pound her tight little throat. "I'm reaching my limit," Don inwardly thought as he increased the pace even further. At this point, Trixie began to feel lightheaded from the lack of air in the position her head was in, but she didn't protest, allowing Don to continue thrusting his cock down her throat. Finally, Don hit one final thrust and kept his cock lodged deep in her throat as he began to throb. The bulge was visible as he reached his climax, and Trixie let out a muffled moan as she felt his cock pulsing. In the next moment, she could feel a warm, slimy sensation in her throat as Don came. Trixie arched her back even more and curled her toes, her entire body shaking yet again as she experienced another orgasm. She used both hands to firmly hold onto Don's thighs, ensuring he couldn't pull away even in this intense position. Don was surprised to see her still so active. He groaned, feeling a strange suction sensation inside Trixie's throat. It was indescribable, almost as if rather than just coming, Trixie was actively sucking the cum from him. After a while, it began to feel a little painful, and Don had to force his cock out. As he did, he let it rest on her face, trying to catch his breath. Trixie, on the other hand, licked the base of his cock and moved her tongue upward, cleaning off any residue. Once she reached the tip, She twirled her tongue around it before giving it a final suck followed by a kiss. She then looked up at Don with a mischievous grin and gave him a little wink, saying, "Thanks for the snack." With Trixie's snack provided, Don was now focused on quickly assembling an outfit before Samantha finished dressing. "It's always the post-nut clarity," Broken Bar Don sighed as he selected a pair of briefs, some socks, a plain dark blue long-sleeved t-shirt, and a set of black jeans. Trixie, who was lying casually on the bed, turned over and looked at Don with a smirk. "No cuddles for Moi?" "I'm hurt," she playfully pouted as she rested her head on her left hand while using the right to trace her finger through the air. "You'll live," Don replied casually, not wanting to fall for her teasing. Trixie seemed to realize this and just pouted before letting out a sigh and laying back on the bed. "So mean, after I let you use my mouth like that too. HMPH." Don glanced at her from the corner of his eye as he dressed but didn't respond, shaking his head. "I don't even want to try guessing whether she's still pretending or is genuinely being fussy." As these thoughts crossed Don's mind, Samantha called out from outside the door, "Donnie, are you still getting dressed?" Don quickly turned his head toward the door and replied, Yeah, just texting a friend. I'll be out soon." "Oh, I'll Broken Bar." "All right then, don't be too long. You don't want your food getting cold," Samantha said, sounding like she was just making conversation. "All right, no problem." After getting this reply from Don, Samantha, who was currently outside his door in tight greenhouse pants and a plain brown jersey, seemed unsure of whether to linger and even leaned in a bit to try to hear through the door. But almost immediately, she pulled her head back and shook her head. "No, I shouldn't be snooping." Samantha gave the door a final glance and walked away. Luckily for Don, he remained quiet until he heard Samantha's footsteps moving away from the door. With his focus on that, his enhanced senses enabled him to hear her even as she reached the stairs and began to make her way down. Don furrowed his brows for a moment. "I don't like having no direct control over this." Rather than being happy about the ability, Don found it very strange. As useful as it was, it felt like his body was reacting to a drug he couldn't control. "The quicker I start working on my powers, the better." Don let out a sigh and felt a renewed sense of motivation to educate himself more about the world and train his abilities, or at least understand them better. "I'm heading down to get my food. Should I bring enough for you or are you fine?" Don asked as he finished dressing and prepared to leave. Trixie remained lying down, raised one hand, and gave a thumbs up, saying, "I'm all good." "Buta Broken Bar, if you really want to make my day, give me another big serving." "Oh fuck, click ban." Before Trixie could finish, she heard the door quickly open and then slam shut. Her figure immediately vanished from the bed, thinking someone had entered. However, a second later, she reappeared on the bed, still half naked with her arms crossed, staring at the door with a narrowed gaze. Talk about rude. After exiting his room, Don quickly made his way downstairs and found both Aunt Amanda and Samantha in the kitchen, starting to plate the food. Aunt Amanda was leaning against the island at the center while listening to Samantha, who stood opposite her. "I need to go see Fabio as well. His boyfriend texted and said he still hasn't woken up." Samantha stopped once she saw Don appear in the entryway. He also paused for a moment before asking with a raised brow, did I come at a bad time?" In reality, Don could hear their conversation from the time he was on the stairs and had just come in hoping to use the topic as an excuse to avoid sticking around. It would be at least understandable if a person who had a near-death experience wanted nothing to do with the topic so soon. Samantha quickly shook her head and smiled. "Oh, not at all, Donnie, I was just worried about Fabio and all." Apparently, some of my work colleagues were also there. "It's really a Broken Bar sigh." Don nodded lightly and feigned a contemplative look. "Yeah, Broken Bar, it's something," he muttered in a distant tone, looking down and shaking his head. He raised his head the next moment and asked, "Do you mind if I just eat in my room? I just want to relax and distress as I eat, then maybe sleep after." Don wasn't planning on doing either, but it seemed like a plausible enough excuse for the current circumstance, and indeed it was, as Samantha didn't argue, though she did seem disappointed. "Oh, That's no problem. I think me and Amanda will just do the same here. Amanda looked like she wanted to say something to convince Don but stopped herself, thinking, it must have really hit him hard as well. I should try talking to him later if he wakes up. Don didn't see a need to say much more, so he simply smiled and replied, thanks, as he reached for a nearby plate with food. He then quickly turned around and left before anything else could be said. Once he got back to his room, Don couldn't help but notice that Trixie was gone. He quickly glanced in various directions but found she was nowhere in sight, and the bed they had initially messed up was now all sorted. I guess I can just look at this as having no distractions, Don thought, not dwelling on it, and walked over to the lone study desk in the room. He placed the food on the left-hand side and then walked over to one of his dressers to get his aviators from a drawer. Upon retrieving them, he wore and activated them, causing an augmented reality with tabs to appear in front of him. He gestured some out of his field of view and then took a seat at the desk, positioning the plate in front of himself before leaning back. Gary assist. Can you create a profile on what I need to know about the following individuals: Nightshade, Director Graham, Commissioner Bateman, and Red Star? Don's fingers hovered momentarily over the sleek surface of his desk, an instinctive pause before he commanded the Gary assist to summon up profiles on some of the city's most pivotal characters. As he settled back into his seat, a pop-up on the augmented reality display suggested an upgrade to the communication interface. Wear the earbuds for enhanced interaction, it advised. Don raised his brow at this but didn't question it and just rose up from his seat before going to the drawer, retrieving the high-tech earbuds. Slipping one into his ear, he was greeted by another message, wonderful, which was followed by Gary's voice, noticeably more monotone and robotic than usual. Can you hear me clearly? Blink once for yes, twice for no, the voice instructed. Don blinked once, and the system responded with a brisk marvelous. It then inquired, for our interaction, do you prefer text or audio? Blink once for text, twice for audio. Preferring to keep his visual focus clear for the information about to be displayed, Don blinked twice. Brilliant, the voice confirmed, processing your request now. One moment, please. Seconds later, the augmented reality display flickered and refreshed, revealing new tabs stacked atop one another, each one showing a concise profile. We will begin with Commissioner Gordon Bateman, Gary Assist informed him. Should you have any questions during our session, feel free to ask, and I will provide further details. Subject name: Commissioner Gordon Bateman. Alias: the Trenchcoat Tyrant. Visual identification: Commissioner Bateman is invariably cloaked in his voluminous trench coat, which seems to serve more as a personal security blanket than a piece of professional attire. It lends him an air of outdated mystery and misplaced authority, like a character plucked from a bygone era of detective stories. Behavioral analysis: chronic skeptic, exhibits a persistent mistrust that could challenge even the most straightforward facts. His approach to truth is akin to someone who would question the sun's promise to rise. Brittle authority: while he carries an air of command, it quickly crumbles under pressure, particularly when confronted by stronger wills. His authority is more Fa-8 than foundation, easily cracked by those who dare to challenge it. Datapad dependence: relies heavily on an antiquated datapad, which he wields more as a talisman than a tool. This reliance is both a shield and a shackle, highlighting his disconnection from the digital pace of modern-day governance. As Gary Assist paused after outlining the commissioner's characteristics, Don leaned back, digesting the information but finding himself a bit curious about one aspect not fully explained. Gary, he started, his tone contemplative, about this datapad dependency, could it be a potential weakness that can be exploited? How often does he use this device in public? Response: indeed, Don. The commissioner's frequent use of the datapad, especially in public, suggests a significant reliance that could be leveraged. Observations indicate he consults it not only for professional references but also as a psychological crutch during confrontations and debates. This could be used to your advantage by disrupting its functionality or integrity, thereby undermining his confidence and authority in critical moments. I can gather more data on this if needed. Don nodded, more than satisfied with the analysis. I'll keep that in mind, Gary. Let's put a pin in that for now and proceed. Operational history. Armchair strategist. Commissioner Bateman has spent considerable time engrossed in strategic theories rather than practical enforcement. This preference has noticeably impacted his physical presence and tactical acumen in the field. Agent of chaos, his knack for escalating crises rather than containing them is well documented, turning manageable situations into tumultuous ordeals. Recent operational conduct, master of mishaps. His handling of the Central Mall incident was particularly criticized. His approach managed to not only offend victims but also exacerbate the tension, turning a potential de-escalation into a spectacle of mismanagement. Technological anachronism. His staunch reliance on outdated technology underscores a broader issue of his inability to adapt to modern law enforcement tactics amidst a world of superhumans. Interpersonal dynamics. Conflict catalyst. Bateman has a peculiar talent for transforming potential allies into foes, his abrasive and confrontational style isolating him within the community he serves. Superhuman supervisor, he often misinterprets complex superhuman incidents as mere bureaucratic issues, significantly oversimplifying and mishandling them. Operational challenges, authority erosion, his credibility and command are consistently undermined by his own actions, further diminishing his stature in both public and professional eyes. Public relations quagmire. His continual struggle with public perception often results in a general consensus of incompetence and mistrust towards his capability to lead. Strategic objectives. Blame redistributor, adept at shifting accountability from his office onto others, particularly in scenarios where his own shortcomings are glaring. Illusionist of order, focuses intensely on maintaining a facade of control and stability, often neglecting the actual deliverance of justice and effective leadership. Don leaned back again, considering the possibilities of use from the information given. Gary, considering all these facets, which do you think can be exploited with minimal direct interaction with Bateman? I want something that humor broken bar unravels him, subtly but effectively. Response. Based on Commissioner Bateman's profile, targeting his public relations quagmire could be the most strategic move. By anonymously enhancing the visibility of his mishaps and strategic failures, particularly through digital platforms, we could further erode his public image and authority. This could be executed without direct interaction, simply by using data and media manipulation to highlight and exacerbate his already precarious position. Additionally, exploiting his technological anachronism by subtly interfering with his data pad's functionality could introduce further operational failures, amplifying his perceived incompetence. The psychological impact of such maneuvers would likely induce a defensive posture, compelling him to make more public errors and deepen the distrust among his allies and the public. The consequences, however, would need careful consideration, Gary continued, his voice taking on a cautionary tone. Such psychological pressure could lead Bateman to take drastic measures, either doubling down on his autocratic tendencies or making erratic decisions that could unpredictably affect the city's socio-political landscape. There's also the risk of him uncovering the manipulation, which could lead to backlash against perceived enemies, further complicating our operations. Don nodded, taking note of the implications. All right. Then plan out the initial steps for the digital manipulation strategy, Gary. Understood, Don. Gary acknowledged. I'll prepare the necessary adjustments and initiate the procedure upon your confirmation. As Don thought about the information provided so far, Gary shifted the discussion of the next profile. Moving on to Director Graham's profile now, Gary intoned, the augmented reality screens flickering as new data surfaced. Subject name, Director Graham. Alias, Mr. Invincible, retired, the capped bureaucrat. Visual identification, once revered as the city's paragon of virtue and strength, Graham has now exchanged his vibrant superhero garb for the subdued hues of a business suit. Though the attire is far less flamboyant, it barely conceals the still imposing figure beneath, a reminder of his days as Mr. Invincible. Behavioral analysis, optimistic politician, Graham exudes a blend of political charm and bygone heroism, using his endearing smile and storied past to influence and inspire, though not always with the desired subtlety. Nostalgic leader, he often looks back to his heroic prime, trying to transpose those tactics into his current political maneuvers, which sometimes proves less effective in the intricate dance of governance. Charismatic convincer, his persuasive skills, sharpened in both combative and corporate arenas, are deployed to sway opinions and soothe tensions, although his approach can occasionally lack finesse. Operational history, hero turned director, transitioned seamlessly from the city's foremost hero to its principal overseer of hero-related operations, now helming the United Hero Management Agency. Policy powerhouse, channels his heroic ethos into legislative reforms, striving to bolster the city's defenses through policy rather than pure physical prowess. Recent operational conduct, crisis commander, he orchestrates the deployment of heroes across the city, employing strategies that some criticize as archaic, reminiscent of his days in the Cape. Regulatory reformer, leads efforts to regulate the activities of superheroes, occasionally resulting in bureaucratic entanglements that critics liken to a villain's snare. As Gary Assist concluded the briefing, he inquired, "Would you like to delve deeper into any specific aspect of Director Graham's profile?" Don shook his head. "No, that won't be necessary," he responded, while considering the information carefully while trying to sound genuinely interested in taking over the city. After all, he knew the conversations he had with Gary Assist would be viewed by Gary himself. So the more he sounded like a villain making preparations the better. Director Graham doesn't seem like someone I can afford to antagonize. Given his influence and standing, an external assault seems like it would just be pointless and stupid. Maybe if I could strike from the inside, but I'd need to find a way into his inner circle or something. Contemplating his limited options, Don asked, "Is there a way I could engage with Director Graham positively, considering the identity I currently have?" Gary Assist's reply was almost immediate, though not particularly hopeful. "Given your present circumstances, evaluation and reputation, direct positive interaction with Director Graham would be exceedingly difficult. To even garner his notice, whether favorably or not, would require a significant presence in the hero senior mirroring the early, less documented actions of Mr. Invincible himself." Don's interest peaked at this. What exactly was Mr. Invincible's approach during those years? Gary Assist hesitated. "A rare occurrence. It seems that information is not available to the public. I will need to conduct further research to find viable alternatives or related strategies." "All right, proceed with that," Don agreed. Gary Assist continued, smoothly transitioning to further aspects of Director Graham's character that might yet offer avenues for strategic maneuvering. Interpersonal dynamics, elder statesman, Director Graham serves as a bridge between generations, offering guidance to young heroes with tales that blend heroism with lessons. His diplomatic finesse also makes him a key player in political circles, adept at smoothing over conflicts with anecdotes from his storied past. Superhero sympathizer, his enduring empathy for those who don capes makes him somewhat predictable, as he often extends more trust to heroes than might be wise, making him occasionally vulnerable to manipulation by more devious minds. Operational challenges, image maintenance. As a former hero now entrenched in politics, Graham battles to preserve his revered image amidst the often dishonorable tactics or political warfare. Generational gap. His old-school approach sometimes misses the mark with a new wave of heroes and the young citizens of Santos City, who may view his methods as outdated or excessively idealistic. Strategic objectives, legacy builder, driven by a desire to be remembered not only as a hero of yore but as a transformative leader, Graham pushes forward initiatives that occasionally butt heads with contemporary views. Guardian of governance. He champions the governance of the city with a firm belief in the power of policies over physical might, a testament to his shift from physical heroics to political strategy. Don over the insights and soon presented another question. "Gary, what are the traits Director Graham dislikes in today's superheroes?" Given I can't catch his eye now and need to steer clear of offending him directly, perhaps I can subtly influence other, less wary superheroes? Gary Assist processed the query. Director Graham has expressed displeasure with superheroes who display overt arrogance or disregard for protocol. He also disapproves of those who rely too heavily on their powers without developing tactical or diplomatic skills. This could be exploited to subtly undermine upcoming heroes who exhibit these traits. List the potential pros and cons of such a strategy, Don instructed, keen on understanding all points of this complex potential plan. Pros: indirect approach. Targeting other heroes would keep your interactions with Graham minimal, reducing direct suspicion. Reputation management. By appearing to align with Graham's values in public, you could enhance your own stature subtly. Long-term influence. Successfully influencing the perceptions of these heroes could lead to broader shifts within the hero community, aligning more with your strategic goals. Cons. Risk of exposure. If the sabotage is traced back to you, it could damage your reputation irreparably, especially with someone as influential as Graham. Unpredictable reactions. Heroes are unpredictable. Their responses to being undermined could vary greatly, potentially backfiring. Complex execution. This strategy requires precise profiling and analysis of targets, demanding significant resources and continuous monitoring. Gary Assist then noted, the effectiveness of such sabotage will largely depend on the individuals targeted. Each hero will need careful profiling and analysis. Although complex, executing this plan without arousing Director Graham's suspicion could be feasible. Don nodded. I see, easier said than done, though. Save all this information. We'll revisit this when I find a suitable hero to test this approach on. Understood, Don. All information will be stored and ready for retrieval whenever you decide to proceed, Gary Assist confirmed. Gary Assist smoothly transitioned the focus of the conversation, bringing up a file that seemed to shimmer into view with an almost noticeable aura of cold authority. Now we will review the profile of Anastasia Volkov, also known as Red Star, he announced, his tone taking on a hint of caution due to the subject's formidable reputation. Subject name, Anastasia Volkov. Hero alias, Red Star. Visual identification, striking features. Anastasia commands attention with her severe beauty. Her long black hair is always slicked back into a tight ponytail. Her eyes shimmer with a menacing red glow reminiscent of danger signs. Costume. Her suit is a stark declaration of strength and allegiance, painted in the severe reds and blacks of a twilight battle sky, accented with revolutionary blue and hints of gold. Physique. Molded like a relic of the Cold War, Anastasia's build is both imposing and immaculate, a balance between lethal strength and deceptive agility. Behavioral analysis. Ice Queen demeanor, approachable only by the bravest or the most foolish. Her expression is a permanent frost, set in a visage as unforgiving as winter in her homeland. Disciplined and stoic, her legendary self-control is so profound, it's said she could detect disturbances from a continent away. Tactical mind. Anastasia is a strategist of the highest order, her mind always weaving through the intricacies of global politics even as she plans the day ahead. Operational history. Cold War poster child, a product of rigorous training and nationalistic fervor, she is both a shield and a symbol for her people, embodying the fierce pride and chilling power of her nation. Symbol of power, her exploits are not merely acts of heroism but strategic demonstrations designed to bolster her country's image and instill a sense of awe and obedience. Recent operational conduct. Walking armory. Red Star wields a suite of powers that make her a veritable bastion of defense and aggression, capable of flight, energy projection, and near-impervious resilience. International peacekeeper. While her presence is intimidating, she has consistently played a crucial role in de-escalating potential global crises, her interventions often cooling down situations that threaten to boil over. After absorbing the extensive profile, Don couldn't help but voice an observation. She seems like someone best avoided. What's she doing in the United Provinces? He inquired, his curiosity piqued despite his reservations. The specific reasons for Red Star's current presence in the United Provinces are not clear, Gary Assist responded. However, Past patterns suggest her visits typically align with diplomatic initiatives or covert operations aimed at strengthening her nation's global standing or intelligence gathering. There's also the possibility she's here for a direct intervention deemed too sensitive for local forces. The likelihood of your paths crossing again under normal circumstances is minimal, but given her caliber and the unpredictability of her missions, it's wise to maintain a low profile and operate with discretion, Gary Assist advised. Don nodded before asking, I'm guessing she has no obvious weaknesses? Everyone has vulnerabilities, Don. If not physical, then psychological. For Red Star, a specific weakness has not been documented. However, potential vulnerabilities, given her character, could include her unwavering loyalty to her country, which could be manipulated, or her rigid adherence to discipline, which might be used to predict and counter her actions in certain scenarios, Gary Assist elaborated. Save this information. It may come in handy should our paths ever cross, Don concluded, aware that engaging with a figure like Red Star required as much strategy as it did caution. Information saved and secured for future reference, Gary Assist confirmed, the digital files syncing with a quiet chime. As Don pondered the sheer scale of Red Star's capabilities, Gary Assist continued to unfurl the complex details of her operational life and strategic intents. Interpersonal dynamics. Lone wolf, Anastasia is an island unto herself, a solitary figure who substitutes companionship with command, ruling her subordinates with an iron will rather than fostering alliances. Inspirational icon, she commands the battlefield not just through her presence but also through the dual-edged sword of fear and respect she instills in both friend and foe, rallying her allies and sending her enemies scattering. Operational challenges. Cultural barrier. Her forthright, domineering style often clashes with international norms, her negotiation tactic being bluntly summed up as comply or confront. Heroic rigidity. Her stoic dedication, while a pillar of her strength, also bars her from adapting to unconventional solutions, limiting her strategic flexibility. Strategic objectives. Global Guardian, Anastasia seeks to expand her vigilant watch from the frosty expanse of Rasa to a global stage, imposing her order wherever she deems it necessary. Legacy of Order. She aims to forge her legacy as a bastion of discipline and authority, envisioning a world molded by her unwavering convictions. Powers and abilities. Superhuman strength. Her strength is colossal, enabling her to alter the physicality of her surroundings with startling ease. Enhanced durability. Impervious to most harm, her body acts as a fortress unto itself. Flight. Her speed through the skies lends her an omnipresence on the battlefield. Energy projection. She wields her energy blasts like a painter with a brush, only her canvas is the chaos of combat. Enhanced senses. With senses sharpened beyond mortal ken, she perceives threats before they materialize. Combat skills. A maestro of martial prowess, she is as deadly up close as from afar. Tactical genius. Her mind is a war room, always several moves ahead of her adversaries. Reflecting on the information, Don muttered, almost to himself, she's basically unstoppable. Gary Assist responded promptly, while Red Star is undoubtedly a titan among classer heroes, remember, no one is invincible. History is replete with tales of the mighty falling, often by underestimating their adversaries or overestimating their own invulnerability. Her discipline and mindset are her strengths, but in them also lie potential avenues for exploitation. Don nodded, taking note of the nuanced perspective. Targeting her mentality might be our only angle if it ever comes to that. Indeed, Gary Assist agreed. Another potentially effective strategy could be attempting to recruit her rather than confront her directly. Don narrowed his eyes at this suggestion, then asked, if her decisions were ever proven wrong or costlier, say, if her actions inadvertently led to significant casualties, do you think she might reconsider her stances? Predicting such a shift in someone like Red Star is complex. She is known to justify harsh actions if deemed necessary for the greater good. Her morality is not black and white, it's steeped in the shades of her mission's necessity, Gary Assist explained. Don took a moment, then decided, keep this information as well. I just wanted a rough idea about who's out there. Now that I have it, We can focus on the real task of strengthening my own position. Understood, Gary Assist responded. All information has been archived. Shall we proceed with your next request? Don, leaning forward in his chair, gave a nod of agreement to proceed with the enhancement plan. What areas do you think I should focus on improving? He asked, though already knowing he didn't want a bombardment of exhaustive details. Gary Assist, recognizing Don's preference, offered a brief overview. Rather than delving into every possible aspect, I'll provide a summary of key areas where enhancements could significantly bolster your capabilities, he proposed. 1. Sensory overload courses. Setup: courses designed in environments that challenge and refine superhuman senses, including areas shrouded in darkness, filled with cacophonous sounds, or saturated with diverse odors. Objective: to enhance sensory discrimination and improve battlefield awareness by navigating through these sensory mazes. 2. Regeneration stress tests. Setup: controlled scenarios that inflict minor physical stress to trigger and enhance healing abilities. Objective: to quicken healing response times and boost recovery efficiency under varied stress conditions. 3. Telekinetic weight training. Setup: exercises involving the manipulation of weighted objects or resistance machines using telekinesis, progressively increasing in difficulty. Objective: to augment telekinetic strength and finesse, enhancing both the precision and magnitude of force exerted. 4. Durability endurance routines. Setup: endurance tests that expose you to high-impact conditions, including environmental extremes and combat simulations. Objective: to fortify natural durability and adaptability, increasing resistance to physical harm. 5. Combat and tactical training. Setup: rigorous sparring sessions that integrate hand-to-hand combat techniques with strategic battlefield maneuvers. Objective: to meld superhuman abilities more seamlessly into a comprehensive combat style, heightening effectiveness during confrontations. 6. Mental conditioning. Setup: a combination of psychological resilience training, strategic simulation games, manipulation and influence workshops, stress conditioning, and cognitive enhancement exercises. Objective: to cultivate a sharper, more resilient mind capable of handling complex scenarios and the manipulating various social dynamics. Gary Assist then paused to elaborate. It is also important that you note, while many of these training modules are available at elite hero training facilities, demand often outstrips supply, making complete access challenging. However, there are alternative methods available within Santos City that can provide a rigorous, albeit more primal, training regimen, he suggested. Alternative training locations in Santos City. Sensory overload courses. Explore the catacombs beneath Old Town for a natural setting that provides the necessary darkness and auditory challenges. Regeneration stress tests. The cliffs by the sea offer a range of physical challenges where minor injuries can be sustained and healed in a controlled manner, enhancing your regeneration capabilities. Telekinetic weight training. Utilize the abandoned steel mills where large and varied scrap materials provide ample opportunity for lifting and maneuvering exercises. Durability endurance routines. The volcanic fields near the city outskirts present extreme environmental conditions perfect for testing and improving your physical resilience. For mental conditioning, may I recommended a high-tech approach. Utilizing specialized contact lenses integrated with your visor technology, we can simulate complex environments and psychological scenarios. When you close your eyes, these lenses will project detailed, realistic scenarios that challenge your strategic thinking and emotional resilience, he explained, outlining a system that would immerse Don in virtual dilemmas. He then cautioned Don about the intense nature of these regimens. Both the physical and mental training will be demanding, pushing you to the limits of your endurance and beyond. It is crucial to be prepared for significant strain, as these exercises are designed to stretch your abilities to their maximum potential. Don sat motionless for a moment as he took in all the information he was being told. Coming from a past where athleticism and discipline were not his forte, The road ahead seemed not just daunting but Herculean. His mind was filled with doubts and the fear of mediocrity in a world brimming with the extraordinary. Am I really considering giving up because it's hard? He whispered to himself, his voice barely audible in the quiet room. I mean, what's the point of a second chance if I don't use it to become something more? Lowering his head, he pondered the futility of this second chance if he let it slip through his fingers due to fear of hard work. If he didn't push himself to become better, this extraordinary opportunity would amount to nothing. As he was having these thoughts, Gary Assist interrupted gently, shall I save the information and prepare a corresponding schedule, or are you having reservations? Don raised his head, took a deep breath, and resolved to take the plunge. Do it, Gary, he said firmly. Processing. Gary Assist acknowledged before presenting the comprehensive schedule. Morning routine, 5 o'clock a.m. Wake up and start with a meditation session, 30 minutes, to enhance focus and mental clarity. 5:30 a.m. Cardiovascular exercises such as running or high-intensity interval training, HIIT, for 1 hour to boost stamina and heart health. 6:30 a.m. Breakfast, a balanced meal designed by Gary Assist. Mid-morning, 8:00 a.m. Sensory overload training, 1 hour, navigating through specially designed courses to enhance senses. 9:00 a.m. Regeneration focus, 1 hour, engaging in controlled scenarios to trigger and improve healing abilities. Lunch, 12:00 p.m. Nutrient-rich lunch to replenish energy and support muscle recovery. Afternoon routine, 1:00 p.m. Telekinetic weight training, 1 hour, using objects of various sizes and weights to refine telekinetic abilities. 2:00 p.m. Durability and endurance routines, 1 hour, subjecting to different physical stresses to enhance durability. 3:00 p.m. Tactical combat and strategy training, 1 hour, integrating abilities in combat scenarios with strategic maneuvers. Evening, 5:00 p.m. Dinner, a high-protein meal to support muscle growth and repair. 6:00 p.m. Mental conditioning, 2 hours, including psychological resilience training and strategic simulation games. Night routine, 8 p.m. Free reading time, 1 hour, focus on recommended books, speed of thought, cognitive echoes. Strategies of Shadows. The Stoics' Path. The Art of Influence. Ruler's Edge. 9:00 p.m. Manipulation and Influence Workshops or Stress Conditioning, 1 hour, on alternate days. 10:00 p.m. Light physical activity such as yoga or stretching to wind down, 30 minutes. 10:30 p.m. Personal time and preparation for sleep. 12:00 a.m. Sleep. Associated diet plan. Breakfast, oatmeal with mixed berries and almonds. Protein shake with whey protein, banana, and a teaspoon of peanut butter. Green tea for enhanced metabolism. Lunch, grilled chicken breast or fish for lean protein. Quinoa or brown rice for complex carbohydrates. Steamed vegetables like broccoli or spinach for micronutrients. Fresh fruit for dessert. Dinner, beef or tofu stir-fry with a variety of vegetables. Sweet potatoes or whole grain pasta. Salad with mixed greens, nuts, and avocados. Herbal tea to aid digestion and relaxation. Snacks, nuts and seeds for healthy fats and energy. Greek yogurt or cottage cheese for protein and gut health. Fresh fruits and vegetable sticks for vitamins and hydration. After revealing all that, Gary Assist concluded, this schedule will need to be revised weekly based on your progress and availability. Is the proposed schedule acceptable to you? If so, we can begin tomorrow. Don remained silent for a moment before finally letting out a deep sigh. Yes, let's start tomorrow. It's a lot, but a broken bar it's necessary, he replied. He was starting to understand that this journey was not just about gaining strength but about redefining his very existence. It would be a grueling path, but the end goal, a stronger, more capable self, was worth every ounce of effort. That's all for now, Don thought to himself as he realized his new ally in this world knew almost every move he was making, while he knew very little about them. He sighed, looking at his desk, which now had a plate of food on it. He began to eat in silence. Meanwhile, downstairs, Amanda and Samantha were still chatting in the kitchen. Amanda was leaning against the island, occasionally picking snacks from a plate and eating them as she listened to Samantha, who stood with her arms crossed, looking worried. "I don't know, Amanda," Samantha began. "I know they were bad people, but taking a life is huge, and it may affect him going forward. Maybe I should have him see a therapist." She sighed and shook her head. "I just don't know." Amanda paused her snacking and faced her sister with an understanding expression. "Easy there, Sam. I know you're worried about him, but he seems fine. Considering what he's been through these past few years, I sort of think it's not his first time taking a life, you know? Maybe that's why he doesn't seem all that fazed. Even if it's not, unless he asks for it, signing him up for therapy doesn't seem like a good idea. I mean, you said it yourself, and now that he's back, the best thing we can do is make things as normal as they can be for him, so he can readjust and get used to it." Samantha sighed but nodded softly at Amanda's advice. "Yeah, maybe you're right, Sam. I think." Before Samantha could finish speaking, a resounding knock came from the door, followed by the doorbell ringing. Samantha immediately turned to Amanda and asked, "Are you expecting anyone?" Amanda immediately shook her head. "Maybe it's Casey again, here to complain about my truck." Samantha, however, didn't think that was the case as she looked at the small clock mounted above the fruit basket in the kitchen. It was 3 p.m. No, she should be at her country club or something by now. "I don't like this." Samantha was extremely cautious after it became public knowledge that Don had killed 4 of the Green Thorns. Though it might seem like she was exaggerating to an outsider, she felt she was being adequately cautious in case Don or the entire family became a target. Hearing Samantha's reasoning, Amanda could see that she was being overly cautious and could easily guess why. Amanda herself felt that Samantha was perhaps too worried, but she didn't outright say this and instead volunteered to check it out. "Let's just ask who it is through the door." Suggesting this, Amanda moved away from the counter and left the kitchen, walking to the entranceway and stopping at the door. "Amanda, wait." Samantha quickly followed her from behind, but by the time she also entered the entranceway, Amanda had already yelled, "Who's there?" She got an immediate response in the form of a male voice. "My name is Benjamin Ford. I'm an assistant to Director Graham in the Hero Public Relations Department." "Is this the Bright residence?" "Director Graham?" Amanda repeated in a confused tone while turning around to look at Samantha before whispering, "Does he mean that Director Graham?" "I think so," Samantha replied, her expression changing from cautious to angry as she recalled the sour interaction she shared with the director, Red Star, and Commissioner Bateman. She quickly strode forward and stood near Amanda before yelling out, "What do you want?" Benjamin, on the other side, recognized Samantha's angry voice from the same interaction at Central Mall. He hadn't said anything then but had watched as she lectured Commissioner Bateman. Seeing that she was still angry, he knew he had to proceed cautiously. He cleared his throat before explaining, "Director Graham was concerned that the leaked information might lead to your son or your family becoming a target, so he sent me here to propose a way forward on his behalf." Hearing the reason, both Samantha and Amanda turned to look at each other. Amanda, not sure how to advise her sister, was clearly angry at all parties involved in the matter, whether directly or indirectly. Had it just been her, she might have immediately told Benjamin to leave, but with the whole family possibly under threat, she couldn't make such a selfish decision despite her lack of trust and faith in both Director Graham and the police. Seeing the doubtful look on her sister's face, Amanda suggested, "Maybe we should hear him out." "All right," Samantha agreed, still not liking the idea. Amanda could see the seriousness in her sister's eyes and felt that the less interaction Samantha had with Benjamin, the better. So, in an attempt to help her, Amanda suggested, "Why don't you call Donnie? He would need to be here." "I'll lead the man to," Amanda started, but before she could finish, Don appeared on the staircase. He had clearly heard what they were saying due to his enhanced senses but pretended he was unaware. He looked at them with feigned confusion and asked, "What's going on?" Samantha was the first to turn in his direction, looking a bit hesitant to answer. But once Amanda turned his way, she immediately explained, A man from the HPRD is here to have a word with you and your mom. Perfect timing. Is that the controlling body for superheroes or something? There's just no end to the amount of things I need to learn in this world. Don inwardly sighed but proceeded down the stairs with a neutral expression. He could see that Samantha clearly wasn't happy about it, so he needed to approach the situation cautiously. After he reached Samantha and Amanda, he stood between them and looked at the door with a raised brow. Well, aren't we going to let them in? Samantha still looked unsure and turned to Amanda, but before she could say anything, Amanda spoke first. Well, I'll leave you guys to talk. Just call me if anything. Amanda gave Samantha an encouraging smile as she left, causing Samantha to sigh and think, she's right, there's no harm in hearing what they have to say. But I'm sure they're just avoiding legal trouble. Samantha took a deep breath before forcing a smile and looking at Don, who had already taken the liberty of positioning himself in front of the door. She gave him a small nod and he opened the door, revealing Benjamin's figure. He wore the same attire he had at mall but carried a brown suitcase in one hand and a folder in the other. He looked a bit nervous when facing Samantha, but he quickly cleared his throat and handed over the document in his hand to her. What is this? She asked as she received the document with skepticism. The man adjusted his glasses before answering, an entry form into the Santos City EHP. For Benjamin and his superiors to make such an offer, it had to be well known and valuable for them to use it as a way to remedy the situation. Whatever the case, Don was genuinely interested in what it was. Regardless of Samantha's position on the matter, he had to at least know what benefits stood to be gained from this so-called EHP. So before Samantha could say anything else, Don spoke up. How about we talk about this inside? We might end up drawing a crowd out here. But Donnie, Samantha was genuinely taken by surprise by Don's decision to step in. In her mind, he should have been more offended by this than she was. However, before she could say anything further, she was dissuaded by the calm expression on his face. It made her feel like she was exaggerating the entire matter. Don knew he was taking a risk by going against Samantha's view on the matter. But if he wanted to make any real progress for himself, he needed to start slowly straying away from going with the flow. After all, he didn't plan on doing so forever. Regardless, he decided to give his reasoning by saying, I want to at least hear what they have to say. After all, it's not like they're the ones that sent Nightshade to attack them all. I'm sure you're not the only parent who's going to want to involve lawyers in this, so let's just hear them out. It won't be too late to say no if we don't agree with whatever it is he has to say. Don played off his interest in the matter by simply saying he wanted to hear out Benjamin. By constantly using we in his sentences, he made it seem like he still had his and Samantha's best interests in mind. In truth, he simply didn't want to give up on a potential opportunity just because Samantha was upset over what had already passed. If the offer from Benjamin was anything like what corporations or government departments use to pay civilians to let matters go, then it was definitely worth looking into. Samantha couldn't bring herself to argue with Don, so she simply looked at Benjamin for a moment before saying in a low voice, "Come in." She walked away from the entranceway first, following her to the office. Although Samantha was trying to hide it, the displeasure could be heard in her voice, and simply looking at the way she was clutching the document Benjamin had brought made her anger clear. Don nodded and watched her begin walking toward her office before turning his attention back to Benjamin. He gestured him inside. "Come in." Benjamin almost seemed relieved to see Samantha walk away first, and upon entering, he came close to Don and spoke in a low voice. "Thank you for convincing your mother to hear me out. I'm sure you have Director Graham's intentions clear by now. Offering you a place in the Elite Hero program has nothing to do with avoiding legal trouble. He's only worried that Nightshade or any remnants of his cause will seek revenge on your family." Elite Hero program. So that's what EHP is, Don realized, but kept a straight face. He only replied with a murmur, "I see." Hearing what EHP stood for increased Don's interest, but there was even more reason for him to keep up his neutral appearance. Despite how Benjamin phrased it, Don didn't believe for one second that Benjamin or Director Graham was acting in his best interest. It was probably for that reason that Samantha especially disliked the idea of even hearing out Benjamin. But Don knew better. Despite how corrupt or manipulative the action might have been, Don knew it was better to accept such offers than to refuse and go against the people who offered them, especially when they were in positions of power. Oddly enough, Don wasn't unhappy to see that corporations and government departments were still as sleazy as they were in his former world. Unlike there, where he tried to be the model citizen who stood up for what he believed was right, here he was more focused on simply doing what was best for him. How can he look so unfazed after being offered a place in the EHP? It has to be a dream for every upcoming hero, especially someone like him with an evaluation of D. He has no hope of entering the program by any other means, Benjamin wondered, completely taken by surprise by Don's lack of reaction at the news. In truth, Don simply didn't understand how huge of an opportunity he was being offered, but he didn't need to. Regardless of whether the benefits were big or small, he fully intended on finding a way to accept them so long as they didn't have cons that outweighed the pros. Walking towards Samantha's office, they could see Amanda at work in the kitchen, but she pretended not to notice them. They entered the office without uttering a word. Inside the office, they found that Samantha hadn't even bothered to take a seat. Instead, she was just standing beside her desk while looking at the document Benjamin had provided. Benjamin looked nervous, once again seeing the stern look on Samantha's face as she read through the document. Don closed the door and proceeded to lean against it, putting Benjamin in an awkward spot. He didn't even feel comfortable attempting to take a seat, and so he simply stood upright and clutched his briefcase more tightly. A short, awkward silence followed before he finally decided to speak up. "First, let me just say on behalf of my department, we're terribly sorry for the incident at Central Mall. I assure you I'm not here to pursue any kind of settlement deal, as Director Graham isn't that type of person. He just felt he was partially responsible for the leak, and so he wanted to offer an apology to your son by providing him an endorsement into the Elite Hero program. I'm sure you yourself understand how beneficial and life-changing this could be for him. But that isn't the reason why the director offered this. As you know, even if you were to pursue legal action and win against our department, the most we can do is pay out a certain sum of money, no more than 10 million. However, you could argue the Elite Hero program is worth far more than that, because not only does it give your son an opportunity to get the best hero training possible in Central City, but also the benefits to candidates of the program, such as security renovations on the home property of candidates, which I'm sure would make you feel all safer as opposed to hiring private security. And again, this is only if you manage to win whatever legal battle you were planning to pursue. And looking at the line of people already looking to do that, if you're lucky, your case may be settled after 5 years. Samantha calmly closed the document, but it was very hard to hide the anger she currently felt. And though Don didn't fully understand the way this world worked, he knew legal bullshit when he heard it. For whatever reason, Benjamin's department clearly didn't want legal trouble and was trying to sell this opportunity as a blessing to Don and the family. Samantha clearly knew this as well, but was trying her best not to let her anger get the best of her. She didn't say anything in response to Benjamin and simply looked at Don. "My son is the one who was most hurt during the incident, so I suppose it's only fair that he makes this decision." Samantha's response shifted the spotlight toward Don, and both she and Benjamin looked at him, waiting for his answer. Don first met Samantha's gaze and then briefly glanced at Benjamin before lowering his head and taking on a contemplative pose, as if he were carefully considering the matter. In truth, what he was really considering was how best to agree to it without hurting his relationship with Samantha. Regardless of whether it was the right decision or not, he knew she would be hurt if he agreed to the offer without solid reasoning. So, what better way to approach it than by making it seem like his focus was on the family? While still looking down, he asked, "What sort of protective measures do candidates of that program have, and what guarantees can you give me that my family will be completely safe if I agree to join?" Samantha's serious look immediately softened as Don asked this to Benjamin. From her perspective, Don was being given a great opportunity that many young, upcoming heroes in Santos City would die for, but it seemed his focus was still wholly on his family. That touched her deeply, to the point that she felt bad for wanting to send Benjamin away so quickly. "Oh, Don," she inwardly thought before glancing at Benjamin from the corner of her eye, awaiting his answer. Benjamin adjusted his stance and cleared his throat again, as if hoping such a question would be asked. "Well, that's a good question," he started. "You see, as a candidate in the Elite Hero program of Santos City, you will be considered a vital asset to the city. Almost all heroes who complete the program end up becoming the pillars of safety that the city depends on for security and defense, so it's only natural that candidates of the program receive the highest level of security the hero governing body can spare. For starters, your home will be fitted with the latest in security tech and residential defense systems, with the addition of 2 Titan-class androids designed by Dr. Gadget himself. In addition, you will get access to some of the best training facilities Santos City has to offer, so that you can better train yourself and ensure you can protect your family should it come to it. Finally, the status of being a candidate in the Elite Hero program makes it so most villains will not find trouble with you or your family unless they want the entire Santos City hero governing body to be on their tail. There are many more perks and benefits that come with the position that I encourage you to read through in the document, but I can almost 100% guarantee you that your family will be among the safest in Santos City should you join the program. You have my and Director Graham's word. This guy really knows how to sell an offer. If he said this to me during high school, I might have just accepted without thinking too much about it. I could probably ask him for cons, but he's more than likely to just either brush it off or lie to my face, so I'm better off asking Gary assist later, Don thought. After thinking this, Don gave a slight nod before replying, "Can I have time to think about the decision? It won't just affect me, so I would like to be 100% sure myself that it's something I want to do for the sake of my family." Although it wasn't the response Benjamin was hoping for, it was better than a number. Looking at Don's demeanor, he knew he wasn't going to get further with him by enticing him more, so instead, he gave an understanding nod and smiled, acting as if he fully supported the decision. "Of course, it's no problem at all. It's not a small decision to make, so take as much time as you need. If you need to contact me," Benjamin trailed off, quickly reaching into the inside of his blazer to retrieve a business card, which he handed to Don in the next moment before adding, "Contact me on this number or send me an email." Not wanting to look like he was just targeting Don's acceptance, he took out another card and wanted to hand it to Samantha, but she didn't raise her hands to receive it. "I think one is enough, unless this one has different information," she inquired in a very distant tone, not even trying to hide her dislike for Benjamin. "Oh no, a broken bar." "It's a broken bar." "Ah. The same information," Benjamin replied while showing an awkward smile. He quickly retracted his hand and then put the card back in his jacket before adjusting it and tightening his grip on his briefcase, looking like he was ready to leave. "Well, if you don't have any more questions, I think it would be best that I take my leave." Don was about to agree, but Samantha spoke first, crossing her arms under her large breasts as she gave a firm nod. "Yes, I think that would be best." After saying this, Samantha walked away from her desk and toward the door, which she opened for Benjamin before saying, "Please feel free to let yourself out." "Thank you for your visit." Benjamin maintained his awkward smile and simply gave a quick nod before hurriedly leaving the office. As he passed by the kitchen, Amanda couldn't help but look at him curiously, seeing as he was alone. Did something happen? She wondered before coming out of the kitchen and turning her attention towards Samantha's office. At that time, Benjamin simply opened the front door and let himself out before quickly shutting it. "Is everything okay?" Amanda asked as Samantha walked out of the office with Don right behind her. She first let out a sigh but then nodded, though she looked unsure herself. "Yeah, everything's all right." After replying to Amanda, she turned her head back to look at Don before asking, "How are you feeling now?" "A lot better. Actually, I think I'll just go back to my room and continue resting up while I think this whole thing over." Samantha nodded in understanding. "Sure thing, Donnie, I'll come call you when dinner is ready. Don nodded in return, saying nothing more as he proceeded toward the nearby staircase. As he began making his way up, Samantha spoke to him again. Oh, and Donnie, he paused and looked back at her. Just know, whatever decision you reach, I fully support you, okay? Just be 100% sure it's something you want to do. I will, Mom, Don briefly replied while showing her a small smile before continuing up the steps. Once his figure was no longer visible, Samantha let out another sigh and turned to face Amanda, who was currently approaching her. How did it go, Sam? I mean, really, how did it go? You seem a bit distressed. Samantha gave a light nod and replied, I don't know, Amanda. Let's go to the kitchen. I'll fill you in. As they were walking away, Amanda put her arm over Samantha's shoulder and showed a mischievous smile as she asked, by the way, don't you think that guy was a bit cute? Goodness, Amanda. What? You're the one always telling me I need to start thinking of settling down. Haha. Samantha didn't say anything else and just looked a bit annoyed, prompting Amanda to press herself against her even more while saying, I'm joking, Sam. You know he's not my type. Don, who had already reached the top of the steps, was leaning against the wall near them, just out of sight, and listening to their conversation. I hate to say it, but Trixie may have been right about taking action before someone else does. The last thing I need is guys like Benjamin coming into the picture. Don sighed and pulled away from the wall as he began walking back to his room. This shit just keeps getting more and more complicated. Strangely enough, I'm starting to get used to it. After heading back into his room, Don took out his phone from his pocket and unlocked it while walking over to the bed. He sat on the edge and swiped through the schedule being shown, then went over to the contacts. Right, I should probably get Amanda and Summer's phone numbers later. After reminding himself of this, Don clicked on Elle's contact and initiated the call. Meanwhile, at the base, Elle was in the room, seated cross-legged on the bed while hugging a pillow. Trixie sat opposite her in the same posture but without a pillow. Instead, she leaned forward with a wide grin. Oh, come on Elle, how long are you going to act embarrassed about it? Trust me when I say you did fine. Elle seemed doubtful of Trixie's words and hugged her pillow more tightly as the blush on her face deepened. I don't know, Trixie a broken bar. What if I scared him away again? Ugh. Why did it have to happen when he was still around? He'll definitely think I'm a freak. Trixie maintained her grin and jokingly corrected Elle. Freaky, you mean? I'm kind of jealous. He didn't even make a face like that when I let him use my mouth like a cheap whore. You're just saying that to make me feel better. No one can beat you at the broken bar sex stuff, Elle shyly replied, hugging the pillow tighter. However, Trixie continued to encourage her. I'm a succubus, and he still seemed to enjoy being intimate with you more than with me. I'm kind of hurt actually. So stop being a worrywart and call him a liar. Buzz. Before Trixie could finish talking, a buzzing noise resounded from the dresser next to Elle's bed. Both looked in that direction simultaneously, with Trixie showing a wide smile once she saw that the source of the buzzing was Elle's phone. Even from that distance, the flashy, almost artistic picture of a young Don with Elle beside him was hard to miss on the caller ID. The name on the caller ID, however, was so long that Trixie couldn't even read it fully. Don, my one and only, bearer of my heart and conqueror. Trixie began reading what she could see with narrowed eyes but stopped as Elle jolted from her position and picked up the phone from the dresser in a panicked manner. Trixie, it's rude to look at other people's phones without permission. A broken bar, she lectured with a small pout, her face entirely flushed with embarrassment. Trixie simply shrugged. Hey, it's not my fault. I accidentally saw your super cute name for Don. Promise you won't tell a soul, Trixie. Elle narrowed her eyes at Trixie and warned her in the most serious tone she could muster, though it was more cute than threatening. Oh, come on Elle. With how many secrets you have me keeping, do you still not trust me to have your back? I'm hurt. Trixie put on a fake sad pout and slumped her shoulders. No, Trixie a broken bar, you know I don't mean it like you. Elle's expression softened, and she was about to apologize, but Trixie showed a wide smile in the next moment, breaking her act. Just kidding, Trixie a broken bar. Elle furrowed her brows, but Trixie waved her off before she could say something. "Oh, you know I just like teasing you, Elle. Now hurry and pick up before the bearer of your heart thinks you're ignoring him!" Realizing only now, Elle quickly snapped her attention back to her phone. Trixie leaned in closer while still smiling and whispered, "You're such a scatterbrain when Don's involved. It's the cutest thing ever." Elle frowned slightly and used one hand to push Trixie's head away while using the other to quickly answer the call. Back in Don's room, after letting the phone ring for some time, he began to think she might not pick up. "Maybe she's busy." I didn't even bother asking Gary what the time difference is between Santos and the base. I should probably click him a broken bar. Hey, pre-broken bar Don. Before Don could finish his thoughts, the call was answered, and Elle's soft voice could be heard. He quickly raised the phone to his ear and responded, "Hey, Elle, are you busy?" "No, no, I was just chatting with Trixie." A broken bar. A brief silence followed as Elle didn't say anything more. During the short silence, though, Don could hear Trixie's voice in the background, "Tell him inaudible. Come on Elle, don't be inaudible." A broken bar. Is everything alright?" Don broke the silence and asked. He immediately received a hurried reply from Elle, "Yes, yeah, everything's fine." A broken bar. Just Trixie being Trixie. "Hey, don't blammo inaudible." Don showed a small smile and replied, "I see, she can be a handful." "How are you feeling, though?" A part of Don wanted to ask Elle directly about what had happened to her when she initiated their intimacy, but he knew it wasn't a subject he could touch lightly, especially since he wasn't 100% sure the old Don didn't already know. All he could hope for was that if the old Don didn't know, then Elle might take the liberty of explaining herself. Hence, he chose to simply ask how she was doing. "Oh, broken bar, I'm feeling better now, a lot better, thanks for asking." After saying this, Elle trailed off again, and another brief silence followed, and again, he could hear some talking in the background with Trixie's voice standing out. "Come on, just inaudible." A broken bar. "You said it yourself, inaudible." "But what if he inaudible?" A broken bar. "I'm inaudible." This back and forth between Trixie and Elle continued for a few more seconds before Trixie suddenly spoke more clearly. "Hey Don." Trixie?" "Hey." Don answered, looking a bit confused. "Yep, anyway. What Elle here was trying to say was hey." Shuffling noises. Don? "Sorry about that." A broken bar. Elle suddenly spoke up after the short interruption. Don decided to just shrug it off and answered normally, "No problem. You were saying?" Yeah, broken bar. "About what happened at a broken bar." Another brief silence followed after Elle spoke. Don could still hear her fidgeting on the phone, and he chose to remain silent, so as not to pressure her. It was clearly difficult for her to talk about this. After a few more seconds, she finally spoke. "The me you saw a broken bar, the one who you, did that thing with, isn't completely me." Don immediately narrowed his eyes and furrowed his brows in confusion, struggling to make sense of Elle's words. "What do you mean by not you completely?" he asked in a gentle tone, trying to keep her comfortable enough to say more, as he was genuinely interested in what was going on with her. Elle went silent again for a few seconds before mustering the courage to continue. "I don't know how to put it, a broken bar, because I don't fully understand it myself. It's like it's me, a broken bar, but not me, like a split personality but far more extreme. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, a broken bar. A broken bar was just so worried, a broken bar, worried you'd think I've become a freak, a broken bar, and want nothing to do with me." Elle's voice became incredibly shaky as she spoke, as if she were on the brink of tears. From her perspective, and taking into account the character of the old Don, it was understandable that she had such worries. But the current Don just didn't have enough of a bond with her to care deeply about this aspect of her. To him, this was how he knew her, so he wasn't particularly concerned. However, seeing how Elle was addressing the matter, he knew it was deeply important to her. And as much as he wanted to immediately say it was fine and relieve her of her worries, his the trait had him pause to consider it more carefully. If I use the right words and tone, I could use this as an opportunity to improve my relationship with her and perhaps better my image in the eyes of Trixie and Gary, who care for her. Don understood that, on the surface, One might think there was little to improve given how obsessed she was with him. But that was just an obsession. More worrisome, it was an obsession whose origins Don didn't know. Because of that, it would be foolish to assume it was enough to keep Elle the way she was forever. No matter how optimistic he wanted to be, he knew how quickly things could change in life, and this piece of thought came not from his The Thinker trait but from a theory he once read about, introduced by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, called the Black Swan Theory. The theory refers to rare and unpredictable events that have significant consequences. These events are beyond the realm of normal expectations and can have a massive impact. This theory suggests that one should prepare for the unexpected and acknowledge that not all events can be predicted or controlled. Donya Broken Bar, are you still there? Elle's anxious inquiry, in a shaky tone, broke Don out of his thoughtful daze. She didn't know it, but her initial words had led Don to a very important epiphany, and with it came a system prompt. Trait upgraded, The Thinker, bronze, The Thinker, silver. Don glanced at the prompt in front of him for a moment before answering. Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry, I was just thinking about how hard this must have been on you. But you have nothing to be sorry for. You've been there for me regardless of the circumstances, so I'll be there for you as well. Okay? Don quickly put together a response, not wanting to drag out the situation. As casual as it was for him, it meant the world to Elle. Not even a second later, she began to cry joyfully. Sniff, I. We're broken bar, sniffy, a broken bar, just a broken bar, sniff, I'm so happy, a broken bar. The weight of meaning in Don's acceptance of her situation was so large that she couldn't even bring herself to speak coherently, choking on her words. I understand, Elle, Don replied. It must have been a lot to have on your mind. But you don't need to worry about that anymore, okay? Oh okay, sniff, I'll give you some space. But I'll call you later. We still have a city to conquer, Don added softly, trying to lift the mood a little and end the call. His words brought a small smile to Elle's face as she agreed, sure, prompting him to end the call. Click. It was far from a perfect interaction but would suffice, especially for Elle, who was used to Don ignoring her completely. After ending the call, Don let out a sigh, yet his expression appeared lively and motivated. He quickly stood from the edge of the bed and rushed over to his desk. He didn't even bother taking a seat but just opened one of the desk drawers to retrieve some sheets of paper and a pen. His mind was still brimming with thoughts after the epiphany he had, and he felt motivated to explore it in deeper thought. He began by quickly writing a title at the top of the piece of paper which read, Current Situation. Then, below it, he began to write what he was thinking. Elle is deeply obsessed with me, so much so that I think she might be willing to do anything for me. This level of devotion can provide me with immediate benefits, such as her complete loyalty, support, and even assistance in my endeavors. Don paused after writing this and left some space before writing another heading, which read, Recognizing the Volatility. Below this heading, he began to write another paragraph. Firstly, I must understand that emotions, especially extreme ones like obsession, can be volatile and temporary. The Black Swan Theory teaches that relying on a single unpredictable element, Elle's obsession, is risky. Secondly, I must understand that a significant change in Elle's feelings or circumstances, a black swan event, could occur unexpectedly, causing her obsession to diminish or vanish. This could leave me vulnerable if I'm too dependent on her unwavering support. Don paused again after writing this but remained focused, tapping the pen against the table as he thought for a moment. After a few seconds, he nodded to himself and wrote another heading titled Mitigating Risks, and below that another set of paragraphs followed. First comes strengthening my relationship with her. I need to build a more stable and balanced relationship. By deepening our bond beyond obsession, I can ensure that she's connected to me through other elements, such as respect, trust, love, and shared experiences. Second is building her emotional resilience. Encouraging her to have her own interests and emotional independence can prevent her from burning out or experiencing a drastic shift in feelings, especially if I start having more women around me. Don takes another pause after writing this and nods in satisfaction, feeling like he's on the right track. Now for the truly tricky part, he mutters as he writes down the next heading, preparing for the unexpected. And below this, he wrote, "First, I need to diversify my emotional investments for my support network. By cultivating relationships with others, I can reduce the risk associated with relying too heavily on one person, at least until I'm able to stand firmly alone. Second, contingency planning. Whenever I can, I need to create contingency plans for various scenarios, especially in the case of Elle's obsession reducing or vanishing completely. The second I can do over time, but for the first, I can use Samantha, Amanda, and Summer. They're closest to me, so it'll be easier than trying with complete strangers." Don took another pause and began tapping the pen against the desk again as he looked at the paper in deep thought. "All right, let's start with the easiest one, Samantha." After muttering this, he wrote the heading Mother, Samantha, and below started another paragraph. The first and easiest way to work towards Samantha would be by exploiting her guilt. "I can't do this in front of Amanda or Summer, but I can subtly remind her of the guilt she feels by bringing up exaggerated stories from the old Don's past. This way, it'll be like I'm opening up to her and not directly accusing her, but it will highlight her perceived failure." The second would be showing vulnerability. "She's an extremely caring mother, so if I act more dependent on her by asking for advice and emotional support, she'll naturally be more open to me. It might even give her a sense of purpose and reduce the likelihood of her seeking companionship elsewhere, as I'll make her feel essential and needed." The third is leveraging her expertise. "She clearly loves her jobs for her to refuse the offer Don's father gave her. I'll need to learn more about what exactly she does so I can show interest in her work." Don paused there and reread what he had written before nodding in satisfaction. "Now, for Amanda." Inaudible noises. Before Don could continue writing, he turned his head for a moment to look toward the window. He wondered as he placed the pen down and walked over to it. He quickly slid the curtain aside and peeked through the small space he created to look at the backyard. Through that space, he could clearly see the figures of Summer and Sylvia, who he simply recognized as the girl from the first day. They were both wearing a uniform composed of a black skirt, white shirt, and red tie, and both wore it casually. His curiosity got the better of him, so he decided to close the small space he created and listen in on what they were saying instead, using his enhanced senses. By simply relaxing and trying to focus on their voices, he found success. Meanwhile, down in the backyard, Summer and Sylvia walked toward one of the plain seating arrangements on the grass, composed of a single round table with surrounding chairs. Summer reached the table first and tossed her bag on it before taking a seat and crossing her arms. Sylvia wasn't far behind and did as Summer did, but after sitting down, rather than crossing her arms in a similar fashion, she instead just leaned forward and looked at Summer with concern. "Hey, a broken bar, are you okay?" "I'm fine, why wouldn't I be?" "Because 2 of my family members nearly died and no one thought to fucking tell me they were okay." "No. Why would I be upset about that?" Summer sarcastically replied in an angry tone. Sylvia just sighed and didn't immediately reply. Having been friends with Summer for quite some time now, she understood that there was drama in her family, especially between her and her mother. Because of that, she already knew that if she tried to reason with Summer while she was like this, it wouldn't lead to anything. Rather, she instead gave support by listening. And without her needing to say a word, Summer continued, "Do they think I don't care? I get that Donnie was hurt, but does that mean I don't deserve a fucking call or text to say they're alright? Especially when it's even on the fucking internet." Back in Don's room, he moved away from the wall as he understood the gist of it. "I guess they had a fight, but if the first day is anything to go by, that happens a lot here." Don could immediately imagine how such a sour relationship in the family could negatively impact his progress and more. That's going to be one of the more tricky obstacles to surmount. Making people be more favorable to me is one thing, but they'll really need to consider me as influential to affect their views on others strongly. Not thinking too deeply on this, Don shook his head and decided it was best to focus on his own relationships with them first while hoping for as many opportunities to fix any problems between the others. So he walked back to the desk and picked up the pen before leaning in to continue writing. He started by writing the heading, Aunt, Amanda, then wrote paragraphs below. First, I have to show interest. Amanda is the person I currently know least about in this house, so I'll need to engage with her more actively. On the first day, she enjoyed talking about her farm when not teasing me, so it must mean a lot. At the very least, it's something she's proud of. My best chance is maybe joining her on her farm some days and expressing admiration for her lifestyle like the old young Don she was so close with. Second, I need to be confident with her, the same way she is with me. Despite being so openly playful, she doesn't speak much about deep topics from what I see and is terrible with handling them. It's probably why Summer and Samantha still don't get along. If I can share the stories I share with Samantha with her as well, maybe I can make her open up. If not, I lose nothing and maybe even show my growing trust in others to Samantha. Lastly, I can offer help with chores or projects to demonstrate reliability and willingness to help her, because what I won't do, another man eventually will, good intentions or not. Unlike Samantha, she doesn't have children, and Samantha will definitely keep encouraging her to settle down. After ending the last paragraph this time, he didn't stop and just moved his hand lower to write another heading which read, Sister, Summer, before writing more paragraphs. Firstly, I need to use nostalgia. I have nothing to relate to with the current Summer, so I'll need to remind her of the good times we had as kids by sharing new experiences similar to them. At the same time, I need to form the bickering siblings dynamic we also had, just to show her that I haven't changed. Because as much as she looks like she's grown, she clearly misses the old much younger Don. Secondly would be shifting the blame. Whether right or wrong, she doesn't seem to reason logically with people so long as she feels they're to blame for something. Taking into account what I just heard her say, she's more upset with Samantha than me, so it at least means she understands the reason I gave for my absence. If I can keep her feeling that way by occasionally sharing some deep stories of Don's past, then I have a good chance of fully repairing what bond she had with Don by making her feel sympathy instead of resentment. Lastly, I need to engage her interests. If I can show genuine interest in her hobbies and skills, then I can make her feel important and valued, which she obviously feels she isn't. Gary mentioned she was a computer genius in her own right, oddly enough, so I can start there. As Don finished writing the last paragraph, he found that he had very little room left on the piece of paper, so he moved it aside and put another piece of paper in front of him. He then immediately continued to write, starting with another heading that read, Execution Summary, before moving to write paragraphs below. For the emotional aspect, I need to use guilt, flattery, and nostalgia to create emotional dependence. To balance this out, I'll need to occasionally and subtly hint at leaving so I can create a fear of loss. For the plan to work really well, I need to isolate them to an extent. To do this, I'll have to undermine their relationships with others whatever way I can. Even better would be to create situations where I'm their primary source of emotional or practical support, making it harder for them to turn to others. And finally, I need to control what information they learn about me. If I can do this using selective truth-telling and deceit, then I can present myself in the best possible light. To amplify this, it would be good if I earn negative information about those close to them and reveal it in some way. Don ended there and put the pen down on the desk before lifting the papers he wrote on up to his face. He briefly looked at them before nodding in satisfaction. Yeah, this will do nicely. With a rough but solid plan now set, Don felt a weight lifted off his shoulders. He knew executing it wouldn't be easy, but having a plan lessened the worry he felt. He moved the 2 sheets of paper away from his face before folding them neatly until they could fit in the palm of his hand. While they were like this, he placed them into the drawer, at the very bottom of a rim of paper. Not the best hiding place, but I can't really trust keeping things digitally for now. Now that he was done writing, Don walked toward the window and peeked through a small space to see what was happening in the backyard. But it was still just Summer and her friend, talking about the same topic until now. Don moved away and just sighed while shaking his head. Well, now isn't a good time to go downstairs. Might as well keep busy by trying out one of the things on the schedule ahead of time. I doubt I'll be able to even follow it fully with how busy I might become, with no interest in acting like a mediator for the conflict downstairs. Don took out his phone and looked at his schedule, trying to see what he could try to pass the time. He initially thought some reading would suffice, but as he was scrolling, he paused to look at the mental conditioning for 2 hours set for 6 p.m. sharp. Well, it's almost 6 p.m., so might as well, Don muttered before retrieving his aviators and an earbud. Once he had them, he immediately activated his augmented reality and Gary Assist. "Good evening, sir. How may I be of assistance?" it asked as the default tabs in the augmented reality appeared in front of Don. It still felt strange to do, but he was beginning to get used to it. "I'd like to try out the mental conditioning exercises scheduled for 6 p.m. tomorrow, just to get a feel of what I should expect." "I see. If that is your wish, then it's no problem at all. However, I must warn you that some of these mental simulations can be very taxing on the mind and may affect your mental health significantly if you're not able enough." The warning did cause Don to stop and think for a moment, but there was no use. It wasn't like he could cheat his way to the rewards of the exercises, as far as he was concerned. So after a brief moment of silence, he answered, "Well, there's only one way to find out. Whether I find out today or tomorrow makes no difference." "Understood, sir. In that case, may I suggest that you retrieve the associated visor lenses from your packed optics case. After you wear the lenses and feel no discomfort, proceed to the bed. Remove any hazardous items from close proximity and then lay on the bed flat on your back." Don already began to walk toward the dresser next to his bed as Gary Assist started talking. He retrieved the optics case where he put his aviators and removed the contact lenses kept in a separate smaller compartment of the same case. After quickly wearing them and adjusting them into place, he began to remove things from atop the dressers and placed them on the desk. Once done with that, he took off his shirt and belt, remaining only in his pants. After this, he lay down on the bed before speaking again. "All right, I'm in position. What now?" "Simply wear the other earbuds so that you can create an environment devoid of external auditory stimuli. The exercise demands concentration, and so anytime you open your eyelids or move your body, the exercise stops and will be considered a failure. The goal is to remain immersed in whatever you are seeing and hearing." "When you put it like that, it sounds like watching a really interactive movie," Don commented, feeling a little less worried to begin. But Gary Assist maintained the warning. "In a way, it is. Only far more stimulating. Please remain vigilant and willful, sir." Beginning simulation now. The exercise initiated, and the world round Don felt like it shifted. Don found himself sitting at a small, cozy dining table, a delicious meal spread out before him. Across the table sat a man who appeared to be in his mid-30s, his expression weary and worn. "Man, this week has been rough," the man said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "Work has been relentless, and I barely had any time to rest." Don felt himself nodding, though the motion was not his own. He tried to look around, to take in the surroundings, but his vision remained fixed, his head locked into place. The man continued, "It's just been one thing after another. You know how it is." "Yeah, I get it," Don found himself responding, his voice calm and understanding. "Sometimes it feels like the whole world is against you." He could feel the empathy in his own voice, the genuine interest in the man's troubles. Yet, a sense of unease began to creep in. The man took another sip of his drink, then paused, a puzzled look crossing his face. "I suddenly feel weird," he said, his words slurring slightly. "I usually don't get drunk this fast." His smile faded, replaced by a look of growing concern. He glanced at Don, or rather, the man whose perspective Don was watching. "What did you do?" Before he could finish, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed forward, his head hitting the table. With a dull, bone-jarring thud, Don's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to move, but stopped himself. His perspective unfazed as the man continued to eat while humming a lullaby. "Hush little baby, don't you cry, Mama's gonna sing you a lullaby, and if that lullaby sounds wrong, Mama's gonna sing it all night long." The melody he used was haunting, filling the air with an eerie dissonance. The man finished his meal slowly, savoring each bite as if he had all the time in the world. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper, as the song droned on, And if that lullaby turns to screams, Mama's gonna show you what it means. And if those screams don't scare you right, Mama's gonna hold you tight all night." Finally, he set down his utensils with a delicate clink, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and stood up. The silence that followed was oppressive. With calmness, he picked up a fork and walked around the table to where the unconscious man lay, his breathing shallow and ragged. Once near unconscious man, the unknown man proceeded to stab the fork into one of the man's hands. The fork pierced through his flesh and immediately drew blood. This action almost caused Don to open his eyes as his whole body jolted slightly by reflex. However, he persevered and kept his eyes shut. His heart rate had gone up significantly after stabbing the man with the fork. The unknown man began to laugh in a low tone as blood trickled from under his victim's hand. "Oh dear, I'm sorry. I tend to get angry over the littlest things," the man said. His hands visibly trembled as he reached out to remove the fork from the unconscious man's hand. He made no effort to address the wound and simply tossed the fork back on the table before muttering, "Very well now, let's get you somewhere quiet where we won't be disturbed." His voice carried an eerie tone, as if he were savoring the moment. After making that unsettling statement, he lifted the unconscious man and threw him over his shoulder. "Quite heavy, aren't you? Well, that is a good thing. The more meat one has, the longer they last. The longer they can play with me," he muttered cryptically before walking toward an old, brown door not too far from the dining table. After opening the door with one hand, it revealed nothing but darkness. The man tapped a light switch next to the door, and a single orange light flickered on, illuminating a set of stairs leading down into what looked like a basement. Don's heartbeat continued to become more erratic, but he kept his arms firmly at his sides and his eyes tightly shut, watching the unknown man proceed down the steps. The basement was very dimly lit, with the only light coming from the single bulb above the staircase and some natural moonlight peeking through small windows. The basement itself seemed like any other normal basement, filled with junk and things that were no longer in use. However, as the unknown man walked further into the basement, Don saw something unsettling. Hidden behind large boxes of miscellaneous items was a workbench modified to look like an operating table. The surface was splintered and covered in dried-up blood. Looking at the restraints on top of it, Don could already guess what was going to happen and couldn't help but gulp. Though one could simply look at it as being an interactive film, the gruesome content was too hard to watch, especially for those who found no fascination with it. Though Don had watched a few horror movies in his former life, he was far from being a huge fan, especially of something that seemed so real and not at all fake. It genuinely felt like he was watching the perspective of a very disturbed man about to perform very disturbed actions, and he could do nothing but watch as the unknown man approached the mortified workbench. Don could also see a set of barrels lined up against the wall with numerous flies buzzing around them. Even though he couldn't smell the environment, his own imagination told him that the place likely reeked of a very foul odor. The unknown man didn't seem bothered by this at all and proceeded to place the unconscious man on the mortified workbench. The unconscious man was placed there with a light thud, and the unknown man proceeded to spread him out on his back before restraining him by the wrists and legs. After doing this, the man stepped away from the workbench and looked over the unconscious man before settling his gaze on his legs. He then walked over and carefully removed the unconscious man's shoes and socks with gentleness and tenderness, which only made the situation more disturbing. The man's meticulous, almost reverent actions made the scene all the more horrifying to watch. As if his behavior wasn't already disturbing enough, after tending to the unconscious man's legs, he walked over to a sink right next to the barrels with flies buzzing over them. The sink itself, much like the workbench, was stained with dried blood and had flies hovering over its surface. The unknown man retrieved a brown cloth that was hanging nearby before turning on the water and making the cloth wet. He washed it a little, squeezed out the water, and then returned to the unconscious man while leaving the water running. Continuing his eerie routine, he began to wipe the man's bare legs, toes, and feet. Don watched, finding it increasingly difficult to keep his eyes open as the minutes flew by with the unknown man carefully wiping every inch of the unconscious man's lower limbs. Once done, The man placed the cloth down and simply began to feel out the legs as he muttered, "Beautiful. I will treasure them forever." After saying this, he took the cloth off the workbench and tossed it over to the sink before suddenly crouching down and revealing something even more unsettling. Under the dark workbench where Don could barely see, the man extended his hand into the darkness and began to feel around for something. A short moment later, he retracted his hand, now holding a rusty saw. Don didn't even need to guess what that was for. Instead, he simply prepared himself for the graphic scene he felt he was about to witness. Lifting the saw from under the workbench, the unknown man stood upright at the side of the workbench near the unconscious man's legs. The sight of the rusty saw sent chills down Don's spine, knowing what was likely to come next. The man positioned himself and, with a sickeningly calm demeanor, placed the saw against the unconscious man's leg. He held the saw in his right hand, but used his left to grip one of the man's legs for support before slowly lowering the saw. As the lights in the basement began to flicker, the saw first met the man's skin, which provided minimal resistance as the unknown man began to move the saw forward and back. The rusty blade pressed down, cutting through the epidermis and dermis, causing blood to immediately flow. The cuts were ragged due to the bluntness and rust on the saw, but this didn't deter the man. Before long, the saw encountered muscle tissue, which offered more resistance than skin, causing the saw to snag and catch. Each movement of the saw produced sickening squelches and tearing sounds. Because muscle fibers were tough, the process was slow and agonizing to watch. Eventually, the saw encountered major blood vessels. Upon sawing through them, blood spurted out profusely, staining the saw, workbench, and all nearby areas. The frayed and jagged ends of the blood vessels looked horrific. The unknown man clicked his tongue in irritation and used the sleeve of his shirt to wipe some of the blood that had splattered onto his face. He paused sawing for a moment and could be heard catching his breath, but it was only for a moment as he looked poised to continue. "Now for the bone," he muttered. 1 hour and 56 minutes later, Don jerked up from his bed and let out a sigh as he opened his eyes. In the next moment, he rolled off the bed and sat on the edge, bringing a hand to his face and shaking his head. "Are you all right, sir? You sound distressed," Gary Assist inquired. Don didn't immediately answer and first let out a few breaths before nodding. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Just what did you make me watch?" It was a highly realistic generated visual simulation of the serial killer Robert J. Marks. What you saw was what he confessed to doing to one of his victims named Patrice Rowland. Don had seen serial killer movies and documentaries before, but none that felt that real to watch. Although he couldn't smell or touch anything, what he saw and heard was enough to leave his mind a bit shaken. The blood, the screams, the cutting of flesh, the spurting of bodily fluids, and so much more. Different people would react differently to watching this type of content, but the average person would simply be left perhaps stunned or revolted. After forcing himself to sit through it, Don couldn't help but wonder if all the simulations would be that revolting and hard to keep watching. I believe hero universities such as SHU do have a trauma readiness program which shows some less graphically similar scenarios. What you watched is more in line with what special forces are made to watch. And I have to do this every day. Don sighed, not even wanting to imagine what other graphic content he'd be made to watch. He couldn't bring himself to complain because he knew that the path he chose to walk on would involve blood and pain. And it was better to train and be ready than to avoid and hope for the best. Because even if someone wasn't fazed by watching such occur in simulation, reality was something else entirely. "I see. Well, is that it for now?" he inquired, inwardly hoping it was indeed the end. After what he had seen, he could use a break. "Yes, you watched the entirety of the scene and so it can be considered a success. Eye tracking statistics do show, however, that you were more distressed than you were calm watching it, so room for improvement is there." "So the goal is to have me be calm for all simulations?" Don asked, a bit curious to know if that's what it took to complete that particular course. But Gary Assist revealed differently. "One of them, yes. The main goal, however, is to have you mentally prepared to witness the most violent heinous acts man has been known to do. It's advisable that you focus on the situations more deeply and ask questions by witnessing horrors through various perspectives. Don nodded in understanding but became curious about something else. In that case, would full simulation be considered better? That would depend on what you expect of reality, sir. I wouldn't advise delving into such detailed simulations using full VR immersion gear. Even militaries avoid using this method as its negatives far outweigh the positives. It is for that reason that it is instead considered to be a form of banned torture. I can see why. Watching was one thing, but being made to fully experience the entire thing, and maybe even from the victim's perspective, a real-life nightmare. Don could definitely see how impactful such a form of torture could be on someone. And the strangest thing was, rather than being revolted or put off by the idea, he felt intrigue instead as he wondered how a person would react to such. Alright, that'll be all, Gary assist. Don had nothing more to ask or research, so he chose to end there. As you wish, sir. Please do not hesitate to activate me if anything else, Gary assist replied before deactivating. Don proceeded to the wardrobe and removed the contact lenses in front of the mirror. He then quickly put everything back where it was and wore a shirt. Once done, he walked back to lay on his bed and decided to use the actual internet of that world on his phone to research basic knowledge and have a better grounded understanding of things. An hour and some minutes later, Don was scrolling through a popular app named YouTube, watching various videos on various topics, mostly trending. What the hell does chiefing pure cybernetics mean? He wondered as he looked at the thumbnail for one trending video. But before he could look up an answer, a knock came from his door. Knock knock. Don immediately sat up from the bed and walked over to open the door, expecting to find Samantha. However, when he opened it, he instead found Summer, looking ready to knock again. She paused when he opened the door and hurriedly avoided eye contact. She had now changed from her uniform and wore a simple combination of an oversized purple hoodie with form-fitting shorts that only extended to her thighs. Not wanting to start their interaction with an awkward silence, he spoke up first. "Hey." "Hi," she immediately answered in a fast manner before crossing her arms and looking slightly to the left. She took a short pause before asking, "How are you feeling?" "I heard about what happened at the mall." I can't tell if she's worried or upset, but regardless, a broken bar. Don had already thought of what he'd say when he met Summer again, so he didn't waste time responding. "It's cute to see that you still care for your big bro," Don teasingly responded, immediately causing Summer to turn his way, looking a bit embarrassed as she frowned. "Hey, She was about to immediately argue, but Don cut her off as he went on to add, "Sorry I couldn't call to let you know. I only realized when I sat down to rest that I didn't have your number. Mind fixing that?" After Don said this, he took out his phone and waved it in front of Summer, who looked a bit too confused to immediately answer. Although upset over the situation, she knew she couldn't directly blame Don. But hearing that he had considered calling her made her feel like he cared. Don could see that her expression grew softer and used the opportunity to tease her again so that the conversation didn't become too long or embarrassing for her. "Are you trying to remember your number or our broken bar?" Summer immediately came out of her daze and shook her head. "What? No. I just a broken bar." "Oh, will you just gimme that?" She angrily grabbed Don's phone and aggressively typed in the number before handing it back to him with equal roughness. "Here." She then turned and began walking toward the staircase as she added, "You better not call me for dumb things. And by the way, dinner is ready, so come down to eat if you're hungry or wait over a broken bar, see if I care." Don watched her walk away and simply shrugged at her words. "Well, what do you know? She can be cute, a broken bar sort of." As Summer walked away, Don watched her go and thought to himself, she's going to be a tough nut to crack. But at least she's not completely heartless. Now is probably the best time to get to know her a little better since she seems somewhat sorry for me. Reaching that quick conclusion, Don closed his door and hurriedly made his way toward the staircase. Just as Summer began descending, he called out from behind her, "So, How was school? Summer seemed a bit surprised to hear Don right behind her and looked a little perplexed. She quickly turned away from him and continued down the stairs as she answered, "Why do you care?" She's not making this easy, Don thought, but he kept his expression calm as he replied, "I'm just curious about how your day was. If you don't want to answer, that's fine. Sorry for intruding, I guess." Judging from Summer's attitude, Don could guess that she had likely put herself on a certain level a lot like most beautiful girls in their teens. In Summer's case, it was probably more than that, but he knew it at least played a part. The best way to respond to such people was to be nonchalant and dismissive as well. Showing too much interest would only lead to annoyance. "What am I doing?" Summer thought to herself, not having expected such a blunt response from Don. She knew he meant well by asking, but it was like she couldn't stop herself from answering the way she did, in part due to her current mood. She remained silent until she reached the bottom of the stairs, where she crossed her arms and stood waiting. When Don finally made it down, she quickly said to him, "School's okay, nothing interesting happened." She answered briefly while avoiding his gaze. After giving her answer, she immediately walked away again, this time heading toward the dining area. Don let out a shallow sigh and slowly followed her. The dining area was right next to the kitchen and had a similar color theme of white and black. The dining table was oval-shaped and black with matching seats around it. Above the table hung a lovely chandelier with a floral design. The walls were white, adorned with miscellaneous .8 copyright core, most being landscape and portrait art with a few family pictures scattered here and there. Samantha and Amanda were already present, with Samantha sitting at one end of the table while Amanda sat to her right. The table was already set with plates on various seats and bowls and trays of food at the center. Summer first walked to the seat directly opposite Samantha and was about to sit down, but before she could, Samantha, who was talking to Amanda, paused and looked her way to say, "Oh, Summer, that seat's for Donnie." Don walked in just as Samantha said this and couldn't help but inwardly worry. "Don't tell me they're going to start an argument now." To Don's surprise, Summer just let out a huff but didn't protest and sat in the seat closest to that one. Don also didn't make a comment and simply proceeded to sit down as both Samantha and Amanda looked his way. Samantha soon asked, "How did you sleep? Are you feeling better now?" As Samantha asked this, even Summers glanced at Don. Don showed a small smile and gave a nod. "Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better now, but still very sore." "Oh, then tomorrow I can head out and see if I can buy you some of the cream I use for my back pain," Samantha said. Don couldn't help but stare at her large breasts before thinking, "No wonder your back hurts. You have to carry around those planetary bodies all day." As if thinking the same thing, Amanda let out a laugh in the next moment as she commented, "With a chest like yours, who needs labor?" "Amanda," Samantha cried out, narrowing her eyes at her mischievous sister, who simply shrugged and giggled. "What? I mean, I'm not wrong. Quite frankly, I'm amazed you're still able to stand straight after all these years. I can't even imagine tending to my farm if I had babies like yours." "Amanda, that's not appropriate conversation for the dinner table," Samantha lectured, clearly still trying to appease Don. Summer let out a snarky huff but didn't say anything, simply reaching out for the food, as did Don. As much as Don didn't mind talking about Samantha's breasts, he, too, felt it was good to have a lighter conversation for now, so he turned to Amanda. "If you're having trouble with your farm, me and Summer can come help you on some days." Summer immediately stopped reaching for food when Don said this and looked his way with surprise. "What do you mean we? I never volunteered to go work on some farm." Don met her gaze and gave her a small smile. "I just thought you could use the exercise, but oh well, I guess it'll be just me and you, Aunt Amanda." Amanda couldn't help but laugh at Don's cheekiness as she played along. "Oh, I'd absolutely love that. And after a long day of work, we can even go skinny dipping by the lake like we used to." "Amanda," Samantha cried out again before lecturing, "that's very inappropriate." "Donnie is a young man now." Amanda playfully rolled her eyes before nodding and acting disappointed. "Fine, regular swimming it is. I guess I'll just have to accept getting down lines." "I'm sure you'll still look good either way," Don complimented before adding, You and Mom look almost the same as when I left. Summer here is still grumpy, so I don't see much of a difference either. Hey!" This time it was Summer who cried out, narrowing her gaze at Don as she immediately defended herself. "If anyone here hasn't grown, it's you. Like, why are you so short?" Samantha was about to lecture Summer, but Don couldn't let her, as that would only make Summer even more upset. Instead, he felt a bit of sibling banter was in order, so he simply shrugged at her comment as he answered, "You say short, I say ideal height. You, on the other hand, could pass for a 14-year-old." Summer dropped the fork she was using to collect food just so she could point at Don as she countered, "I've been told that I look 21. You don't know what you're talking about. You, on the other hand, most guys in my school are taller than you." Don simply smiled at this before answering, "And yet they're only half the man I am." Ironic, isn't it? Amanda couldn't help but laugh at this comeback, while Samantha was lost on what to say. She had initially wanted to intervene because she was worried Summer would annoy or even anger Don, but that wasn't the case. As she watched them bicker, she couldn't help but look back to the days when they were younger and almost exactly the same as they were now, arguing over pointless topics with Don basically being the instigator and Summer defending herself. A small smile appeared on Samantha's lips as she felt nostalgic watching this. "Oh please," Summer rolled her eyes, "I have college guys practically begging for me to go out with them. You, on the other hand, I'm pretty sure none of my friends would even consider going out with you." Don raised his head and brought a hand under his chin as if he were thinking about something before answering, "Last I checked, college guys will go after anything in a skirt, so that's not really an achievement, Summer. As for high school girls, they barely understand themselves. I wouldn't expect them to know what's considered an ideal guy. That's why, personally, I prefer my women mature, sophisticated, and smart." Both Samantha and Amanda showed surprise on their faces as Don said this, but only Amanda commented with a cheeky tone, "Careful what you say, Donnie." "Next thing you know, Cassie will be waiting outside for you tomorrow, ready to eat you up." As Amanda said this, Samantha's initial smile completely faded, and she looked annoyed. "I won't let her get anywhere near Donnie. I don't trust her to act appropriately." While Samantha said this to Amanda, Summer was still defending herself. "Hey, I'm as smart, mature, and sophisticated as they come. You have no idea what you're talking about." After Samantha said this, Don gave Summer a skeptical look as he eyed her up and down before giving her a sarcastic, "Sure, you're exactly who I think of when I think sophisticated, mature, and smart." Summer narrowed her eyes even more, and Don was expecting her to defend herself yet again, but to his surprise, she did something completely unexpected as she attacked. Without warning, Summer stood up from her seat and tackled Don. Don was only able to react when her figure had already collided with his, and they were falling to the ground. Thump! They landed with a soft thud, and Summer began to wrestle with him. "Take that back or I'll hit you." "Summer, Donnie is injured, get off him right this instant." Samantha immediately stood from her seat and walked over to try and defuse the situation. Amanda, on the other hand, simply reclined further into her seat and showed a smile while saying, "Well, this brings back memories." Well, this was unexpected, Don thought, but it was a welcome surprise. Summer wasn't especially strong, and with little effort, Don was able to turn himself over and pin her to the floor. "Ow!" She let out a small groan, but before she could compose herself, Don reached his hands for her sides and began to tickle her. "Hey, stop!" "Mom, tell him to stop." "Mom, why are you just watching him?" "I swear I will kill you once I get up, Donnie." Samantha's expression relaxed. She couldn't help but show a wholesome smile as she watched the two fight. It really did bring back memories of better times. She simply shook her head and turned to leave. "You two are both grown-ups, so I'll leave you to sort it out yourselves." "But Mom, stop him." "I'm serious." Summer continued to struggle to break free. "Say, please let me go, my handsome, tall, big brother," Don teased while still tickling Summer. "Arg, no." "Suit yourself. I can do this all night." Left with no choice, Summer finally gave in. "Fine. Please get off me, tall, handsome, big brother." "There, I said it. Get off." After Summer conceded defeat, Don got off her and returned to his seat. She quickly stood up and approached him from behind, throwing a punch at his shoulder. She put a lot into it, but even then, it didn't have much of an effect, especially on someone with higher than normal durability. Still, Don quickly reacted as if he was in pain. He groaned out, immediately causing everyone's expressions, including Summer's, to change to one of worry. "Hey, I didn't hit you that hard," Summer said. Her voice hinted with a bit of concern. Don ignored her words and continued to pretend, causing the ever-worried Samantha to immediately stand up from her seat and rush toward him. "Oh no, Donnie, are you okay?" she asked worriedly as she came to his side to examine his shoulder. She then quickly explained to Summer, "You hit the hand that he had broken, Summer, but he clearly said he's still feeling a bit sore." "Oh goodness." Samantha sighed before breaking away from Don and saying, "Let me go get some pain ointment, okay? And no more huzzing, both of you," she lectured in a motherly tone before walking away. Summer wanted to defend herself, but if what Samantha was saying was true, then she did have reason to blame herself for forgetting that Don was still injured. However, she couldn't admit this directly, so she tried to look as unconcerned as possible while avoiding his gaze, though her slightly nervous body language gave her away. "Don't start fights if you know you're injured, you big dummy," Summer muttered. Don raised his head slightly and saw that Aunt Amanda wasn't looking. He took the opportunity to glance Summer's way, prompting her to meet his gaze for a moment as he stuck out his tongue in a mocking way. Summer's expression shifted from surprise to anger as she narrowed her eyes at Don. "He's faking being hurt by my punch," she thought before yelling, "Why?" Before Summer could say anything more, Don looked away from her and groaned in pain a bit louder, causing Amanda to look his way. She chose to stand up and approached him, asking, "Is it bad?" She stood near Summer to look at his shoulder. "Where does it hurt?" "My whole hand doesn't really hurt as much, but there's a bit of a strange tingling sensation," Don replied, completely lying through his teeth. Summer continued to glare at him, no longer buying what he was selling. Amanda, however, fully believed him and was now thinking over Don's answer. After a moment of thought, she placed her hands on her hips and revealed, "I wouldn't worry too much, then. It should just be your hand reacting to being disturbed as it fully heals up. You see a lot of this in superhuman wrestling. Don't forget, you did just break your hand. At the very least, you need to give your entire body maybe a week to fully heal." Some rolled her eyes at Amanda's diagnosis. "Way to put your nude mud wrestling knowledge to use, Aunt Amanda." Amanda didn't take offense and simply shrugged her shoulders. "You'd be surprised how in-depth the medical commentary can become. I've been applying it to the injuries I got over the years on the farm, and it's helped me considerably." "Geez, just choose a chatbot like every other normal person," Summer retorted. "Summer has a point," Don added with a groan, causing Aunt Amanda to look his way with a bit of disbelief. "Really? You're siding with her?" Don tilted his head slightly before adding, "What can I say? She looks like she spends a lot of time in the mud, so we can trust her expertise." Though a terrible joke, since it was at the expense of someone who believed they were being supported, it had an ironic humor to it and caused Amanda to chuckle while shaking her head. Summer, on the other hand, looked at Don with an even sterner expression before stretching out her hand to try and grab him. "Why?" Before her hand could reach him, Amanda stepped in to try and hold her back. "Hey, come on, Summer, you're going to hurt him more." At this point, since Don was clearly exaggerating his pain and Summer was already being blamed, she figured why not hurt him a little more. So she simply responded by saying, "Yeah, that's the point. He clearly needs a good beating." By this time, Samantha had come back and found Summer doing this, so she couldn't help but lecture her. "That's enough, young lady. Don't you think you're overreacting? He was only just teasing you." Summer stopped when Samantha chimed in and immediately wanted to defend herself, but Samantha continued, "And you were just complaining about how sophisticated you are. Is this how a sophisticated young lady should really be acting?" Summer found herself unable to argue with Samantha's point. More than that, she knew if she tried to say that Don was faking it, they wouldn't believe her. This left her with no option, which very much frustrated her. "This is unbelievable." "Fine, take care of Mr. Injured here, see if I care." After saying this, Summer walked away from the dining table and was about to exit the dining area. But as if remembering something, she came to an immediate halt before turning around and walking back to the table. She picked up her plate and added a few pieces of chicken from one of the bowls. Only after doing that did she walk away with her plate in hand. As she approached Samantha and was about to walk past her, Samantha heaved a sigh and tried to reason with her. "Oh, Summer, don't be like Thesa." "No, it's fine," Summer angrily replied as she aggressively made her way up the stairs. Samantha could only heave another sigh as she watched her leave before turning and walking over to Don. "That girl will be the death of me," Samantha muttered as she shook her head. Amanda just chuckled at this and gave her a little tap on the back. "Oh, don't be too hard on her. She probably just missed rosing with her big brother." "I know, but he's injured." "It was bad enough she practically tackled him," Samantha defended. But she wasn't so blinded by her worry for Don that she overlooked his part in the matter as well. She looked at him and added, "And you, Donnie, you know how your sister can be. You shouldn't tease her like that, you're only going to make her act out." Don nodded in understanding. "All right, I get your point. I'll say sorry to her on my way to bed." Hearing this, Samantha couldn't help but show a warm smile. "That's better. You two are both too old to be fighting. I'm not getting any younger. So it's going to be you who has to look after your sister should anything ever happen to me." "Well, I activated the whole motherly lecture, but this is good. It means they're starting to grow used to the way I'm acting and don't find it suspicious at all. I should be fine as long as I don't overdo it and slowly get used to their habits and personalities," Don thought to himself. Samantha quickly had Don roll up the sleeve of his shirt so she could apply the ointment to his shoulder area. As she worked, she spoke about the values of being an older brother and expressed her hope for him and Summer to get along after she was gone. As she finished up, Amanda couldn't help but step in. She placed a hand on Samantha's shoulder and smiled, saying, "You've made your point, Sam. No need to spend the whole night on it. You know they're still going to argue often." "I mean, you and I didn't get along until you had Summer. Ha ha." Samantha couldn't argue with Amanda's words because she knew Amanda was right. Don and Summer would likely continue to bicker as they had when they were younger. She sighed and lowered Don's sleeve before pulling away. "I know, and that's exactly why I'm trying to make sure they don't make the same mistakes. If I had listened to you earlier, then I would have known that bastard Nicholas was up to no good." After saying this, Samantha immediately brought a hand to her mouth, as if regretting her language. She then looked at Don and quickly said, "Pardon my language, it's just a broken bar." "Hey, I get it," Amanda responded, holding Samantha more tightly. "Look at it this way, if you listened to me from the start, you'd have never given me a fiery little niece and a loving nephew." Seeing it from that perspective, Samantha could not bring herself to argue anymore and simply smiled. "I guess you're right. We should get back to the meal. I should probably leave now just in case Summer is the type to go to sleep early." Don felt the opportunity was still there to interact with Summer and didn't want to let it go to waste. After Samantha pulled away and rolled down the sleeve of his shirt, Don moved his shoulder a bit as if stretching, then remarked, "The tingling is still there, but it's not as irritating now." Samantha was happy to hear that her remedy worked, which was exactly Don's aim to make her feel important to him and show that her motherly nature was needed. "That's good. I'll get you some of your own first thing in the morning, okay?" "Sure," Don aptly replied before deciding it was time to make his exit. "Well, let me just grab my food to go as well. I don't want Summer feeling bad that we're eating without her. It'll just make her more grumpy tomorrow." Using that reasoning, Don knew neither Samantha nor Amanda would try to change his mind, because as troublesome as Summer was, they both still cared deeply for her. Samantha indeed thought it was a very good idea and felt touched that Don was willing to take the first step. He's really become more mature. "I hope some of it rubs off on Summer." Amanda thought something similar but was more vocal about her thoughts. "Great idea, and piece of advice. Don't tease her about her plushies." "Plushies?" Don repeated in his mind, but before he could give a reply, Samantha seemed to have an idea as her face lit up. "Oh, and one more thing." Without elaborating further, she hurriedly left the dining hall and walked to the kitchen. A few seconds later, she came out holding a strange-looking plastic bottle. With his keen vision, Don was able to make out that it was a sauce before she even arrived in front of him with it. Here, in case she tries to ignore you, just mention you have some of Aunt Amanda's special sauce. She absolutely adores it. Amanda chuckled and gave an agreeing nod. That she does. Remind me to bring more when I head back to the farm. Don couldn't help but wonder, what makes it special? Maybe I might see how she makes it the day I visit her farm. Not wanting to delay by asking questions, Don simply received the bottle, added some food to his own plate, and turned to leave. As he was walking, Samantha couldn't help but remind him, make sure you both bring your plates down. You'll attract bugs leaving unfinished food in your rooms. No problem, Don casually replied without looking back and made his way up the stairs. Once upstairs, he immediately walked over to Summer's room and knocked on the door. Knock knock. After knocking, he got an immediate response, and Summer yelled out, go away. Don't be like that, Summer, open up. Don tried to reason with her, but her stance didn't change. If anything, it only became more firm. I especially don't want to see you. Go get your boo-boos rubbed or whatever since you're so fragile. If she's single then I understand. I can't imagine how petty of a girlfriend she would be. Don simply shook his head as he saw that there was no convincing Summer with words alone. He raised the plastic bottle of sauce before thinking, I guess it's time to use the item. She's lucky I'm not petty enough to add my own special sauce to it. Fine, I guess I'll just enjoy this whole bottle of Aunt Amanda's sauce on my own. Good night. Don feigned excitement to act like he wasn't the least bit bothered by her refusal. Hey wait. Hearing her say this, Don began moving his legs in place to make it sound like he was walking away. He could hear chaotic shuffling come from Summer's room. A few seconds later, the door swung open, and Summer looked like she was ready to sprint out, only to calm down upon seeing Don standing right in front of her door. She must really love this sauce. On a serious note, I may have to either get more or learn how to make it, Don thought with a small smile on his face. Summer, unaware of what he was plotting, took his smile for mocking and frowned. Are you here just to piss me off? Do you even have this? Or before Summer could finish her sentence, she spotted the bottle in Don's hands and looked at it with surprise. They gave you the whole thing? What the heck? She thinks it's all for me? Don's smile grew a little wider as he explained to Summer, well, you've been enjoying the sauce for many years, and I haven't. So, I just got given this bottle to make up for it. Aunt Amanda says she'll bring more next time she heads to the farm. Don explained it this way because he knew it would sound more believable. And Summer, though a bit suspicious, had no reason to doubt that as it made sense. Instead, she became skeptical over something else. Then why share it with me? Don shrugged his shoulders. Who knows? Maybe it's because I'm the best big brother there is. Or I'm just a concerned civilian trying to stop a maniac from devouring chicken without sauce. Summer couldn't help but crack a smile but immediately tried to hide it as she rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. Ha, ha, you're so very funny. Well, whatever, come in, I guess. Don smiled and took her up on the offer. One small step for man. As Don stepped into Summer's room, he was immediately greeted by an overwhelming wave of femininity. The walls were painted a soft lavender, a color that perfectly complemented the delicate white furniture scattered around the room. A large canopy bed dominated the space, its gauzy white curtains tied back with silky purple ribbons. The bedspread was a luxurious quilt of various shades of purple, and the pillows were an eclectic mix of fluffy, heart-shaped, and sequined designs. Don's eyes wandered across the room, taking in the details. The walls were adorned with posters of various pop idols and fashion models, their perfect smiles beaming down at him from every angle. Some of the posters were slightly worn at the edges, evidence of them having been up for quite some time. In one corner, a small vanity table was cluttered with an array of makeup, hair accessories, and a few bottles of perfume. The mirror was surrounded by a string of twinkling fairy lights, giving the room a soft glow. The atmosphere of the room was undeniably feminine, yet there was an endearing childish charm to it as well. Scattered across the bed and floor were several plush toys, the most prominent of which were the Snow White rabbit plushies that sat perched on the bed, their large, comical eyes staring blankly ahead. These particular plushies were a new addition, and they were so ridiculously over the top that Don had to resist the urge to burst out laughing the moment he saw them. He barely managed to keep his expression neutral, but Summer, who had already noticed his faltering composure, furiously pouted. "What's so funny?" she demanded, her voice tinged with irritation as she crossed her arms over her chest. Summer had taken the liberty of changing into her sleeping attire before Dawn had entered. She wore a matching set of pajamas in varying shades of purple, complete with a pair of fluffy slippers that had small bunny ears on them. Her hair, usually styled into a ponytail, was now down in loose waves, and there was a slight flush to her cheeks, likely from the irritation at Don's barely contained laughter. "Nothing," Don shrugged, struggling to keep his face straight. But Summer wasn't buying it. "You're laughing at my room, aren't you?" she accused, her frown deepening as she stomped one foot on the ground. "I knew it." "You think it's childish, don't you?" Don quickly raised his hands in defense, trying to defuse the situation before it escalated further. "Hey, I didn't say anything," he countered, though his voice showed a hint of amusement. "But come on, Summer, you have to admit, those bunny plushies area broken bar something else." Summer's frown turned into a full-blown scowl. "They're cute," she insisted, her voice rising defensively. "And if you don't like them, you can just leave." Don blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in her tone. He hadn't expected her to be so sensitive about her plushies, and now he found himself on a delicate line between teasing her and actually hurting her feelings. Realizing the situation could spiral out of control if he wasn't careful, Don decided to play along. He put on his most sincere expression and nodded. "You're right, they are cute. I just didn't expect you to have something so broken bar fluffy in here." "I guess it surprised me." But Summer wasn't ready to let it go just yet. She narrowed her eyes at him, clearly not convinced by his sudden change in tone. "I don't believe you." "You're just saying that because you don't want me to kick you out." Don couldn't help but chuckle at her stubbornness, though he quickly stifled it when she shot him another glare. All right, I admit it, your room is a broken bar, not what I expected. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a broken bar different from what I remember." Summer seemed to relax slightly at his admission, though her arms remained crossed as she eyed him warily. "Different how?" Don took a moment to consider his words carefully. He didn't want to set her off again, but he also didn't want to lie. "Well, for one, it's a lot more a broken bar grown up than I remember. But at the same time, you've got these little touches that remind me of the old you. It's like a mix of who you were and who you're becoming." Summer's expression softened as she considered his words. She looked around the room, taking in the various elements that made up her personal space. The posters, the makeup, the plushes, they were all pieces of her personality, and Don's observation seemed to strike a chord with her. "Yeah, I guess maybe you're right," she admitted, her voice quiet now. "I didn't really think about it that way." Don smiled, sensing the tension easing between them. "See, no need to get all worked up. I'm just getting to know the new you." Summer let out a small huff, though it lacked the earlier venom. "Fine, but you still didn't have to laugh at my plushies." "They're important to me." Don nodded, his expression turning serious. "I get it, Summer. I didn't mean to make fun of them. I just a broken bar didn't expect them, that's all." For a moment, it seemed like the situation had been diffused, but then Summer's eyes narrowed again as if she had just remembered something. "Wait a minute," she said slowly, "are you really sorry? Or are you just trying to butter me up so you can stay in here?" "Bruh." "Let it go." Don felt like sighing, but seeing as she wasn't letting it go, he used the opportunity for a little playful banter. "What do you think?" he asked, his tone teasing. Some rolled her eyes and uncrossed her arms again. "I think you're full of it," she muttered, though there was no real bite to her words this time. Don couldn't help but laugh at her remark, which only seemed to annoy her further. "Oh, come on, Summer, don't be like that," he said, still chuckling. "You know I'm just messing with you." "At this point it's like you want to be upset with me." But Summer wasn't ready to let him off the hook so easily. She pointed toward the door, her expression serious. "If you're just here to make fun of me, then maybe you should just leave." The playful atmosphere that had been building between them suddenly shifted, and Don realized that he might have pushed her too far. But he genuinely found it hard to tell what she took offense to exactly. He hesitated for a moment, considering his options. He could try to smooth things over with another joke, or he could leave before things got worse and just learn more about later. In the end, he opted for the latter as he didn't want to risk getting on bad terms with her so early. He turned toward the door, ready to make his exit. "All right, if that's how you feel, I'll go." Before he could finish his sentence, Summer moved in front of him, blocking his path to the door. "Wait," she said, her voice firm but tinged with a hint of shyness. "I didn't mean it like that." Don paused, caught off guard by her sudden change of heart. He looked down at her, noticing for the first time how vulnerable she seemed in that moment. The earlier bravado had faded, replaced by a look of uncertainty that left him puzzled. Summer lowered her gaze, fidgeting with the hem of her pajama top as she struggled to find the right words. "I just a broken bar. I don't want to be made fun of, okay? I'm tired of people always treating me like a kid. I know I can be immature sometimes, but a broken bar it doesn't mean I'm not trying." Don felt a bit of guilt at her words. He hadn't meant to make her feel that way, but at the very least she opened up to him about it, and that could be seen as a big step forward. He could only go with flow and act sorry. "Hey, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings," he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I was just messing around. I thought we were having fun." Summer looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of dishonesty. "We were, but a broken bar I don't know. Sometimes I feel like. Never mind. It's stupid anyway." Don feigned a concerned expression and leaned in closer to Summer. "Summer, you don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but if something's bothering you then you can talk to me about it if you want," he said gently. "I promise I won't make fun of you." Summer blinked, as if surprised by his words. "You mean that?" Don nodded, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Of course. What kind of best big brother would I be if I didn't?" Summer's expression softened, and for a moment, Don saw a glimpse of the little Summer he never knew, the one who always looked up to her elder brother with eyes full of admiration. "Thanks, Donnie," she said quietly. Don smiled and took the opportunity to pull her into a hug. "Anytime, Summer. You're stuck with me, remember? You might as well make the most of it." Summer chuckled softly against his chest, the sound muffled by his shirt. "Yeah, I guess I am." The hug didn't last long. Almost as soon as Don wrapped his arms around Summer, she quickly pushed him away, turning her back to him with an awkward cough. "We should eat before the food gets cold," she muttered, avoiding eye contact as she busied herself with her plate. Don sighed inwardly. So much for thinking he had cracked her shell. He had hoped the brief moment of warmth between them might lead to more, but Summer was proving to be as guarded as ever. "Can't win them all," he thought, trying not to let his disappointment show. As he settled back onto the bed, he watched her fuss over her food. He needed to break the ice again, but he knew he couldn't just dive back into their earlier banter. He needed a different approach. "Hey," Don began, keeping his tone casual, "do you want to watch something or maybe play some music while we eat?" He wasn't particularly interested in either, but he figured it might be a good way to learn more about her tastes. After all, if talking wasn't going to get her to open up, maybe her music or show preferences would give him some insight. Summer paused, fork and knife hovering above her plate as she considered his suggestion. "What kind of music do you want?" she asked, her voice lacking the earlier edge. Don shrugged, trying to appear as laid back as possible. "I'm not picky. Why don't you choose? I trust your taste doesn't suck." Summer shot him a suspicious look, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied his expression. "Are you making fun of me again?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively. "Because if you are, don't think I won't punch you again." Don held up his hands in mock surrender, a grin tugging at the corners of his lips. "Hey, I'm serious. I just want to try something new. I'm sure whatever you pick will be great." Summer hesitated, clearly not entirely convinced, but after a moment she rolled her eyes and relented. "Fine, but don't blame me if you don't like it." "You're probably just saying that because you know my taste is better than yours." "That's exactly it," Don replied smoothly, though internally he was relieved she hadn't called his bluff. The truth was, even though he had a general idea of what was popular in this world, He couldn't risk picking something she disliked and blowing his cover. Better to let her take the lead. Summers gave him one last suspicious look before turning away to grab her phone from the nightstand. Don watched as she tapped the screen a few times. After a moment, the soft strains of a song began to fill the room, the melody light and airy, with a catchy beat that immediately had Don tapping his foot in time. Summer set her phone down on the bed beside her and glanced over at Don, gauging his reaction. "Not bad," he said, nodding along with the music. "What is this?" "Just some pop music," Summer replied with a shrug, though there was a hint of pride in her voice. "It's one of my favorite bands. They're pretty popular right now." "Well, I can see why," Don said honestly. The song was upbeat and catchy, the kind of music that was hard to dislike, even if it wasn't his usual taste. It seemed Summer had good instincts after all. After they had settled into a more relaxed atmosphere, Don glanced around the room, trying to figure out the best spot for them to sit and enjoy their meal. "So, where should we sit?" he asked, genuinely curious about what Summer preferred. Summer didn't hesitate. "The floor," she replied, as if it were the most obvious choice. Don raised an eyebrow, feigning offense. "The floor? Really? What, do you think I'm going to spill sauce and crumbs everywhere or something?" Summer crossed her arms and gave him a knowing look. "Yes, actually. You were always a messy eater, Donnie." "Better safe than sorry." "Come on, I've grown since then," Don protested, though he couldn't help but chuckle. "Isn't it a bit unfair to assume I haven't improved?" "Better safe than sorry," Summer repeated, but with a smirk that made it clear she wasn't budging. Resigning himself to her decision, Don watched as Summers gracefully sat down on the floor, using the frame of her bed as a backrest. She looked at ease, like this was something she did often. With a small shrug, Don joined her, though he left a bit of space between them, giving her room to breathe. No sooner had he settled down than Summer held out her hand, her expression expectant. "Hand over the sauce." Don couldn't resist messing with her a little. "I'll put some on your plate for you," he offered, grabbing the bottle. "I don't trust you not to drown your food in it." Summer rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed with his reasoning. "You're so petty," she muttered, but she didn't argue, letting him pour the sauce onto her plate. After he was done, Don added a generous amount to his own plate before setting the bottle aside. They both began eating in silence, the sound of soft music still playing in the background. As Summer took her first bite, her eyes widened in delight. "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with euphoria. Don couldn't help but smile as he watched her out of the corner of his eye. She looked incredibly wholesome in that moment, her usually guarded demeanor replaced by genuine happiness. For a second, he forgot to eat, just distracted by the sight of her enjoying herself. But then Summer noticed him looking and paused, a piece of chicken still halfway to her mouth. "What are you staring at?" she asked, her voice muffled by the food she had already bitten into. Don, never one to pass up an opportunity for some light teasing, smirked. "Oh, nothing. Just observing how a sophisticated girl eats." Summer's eyes narrowed, and before Don could react, she punched his shoulder though not too hard. "You're still such a jerk," she muttered, but there was no real heat behind her words. Don pretended to be hurt, clutching his shoulder with an exaggerated wince. "Ow! I'm telling Mum." "Yeah, right, you big baby," Summer scoffed, not buying his act for a second. Seeing this as a perfect opportunity to escalate their playful banter into something more physical, Don decided to take a risk. Without warning, he reached over and pinched her exposed thigh just above her knee. Summer yelped in surprise, dropping her piece of chicken onto her plate. She glared at Don, her cheeks flushing slightly as she rubbed the spot he had pinched. "Look what you did," she protested, clearly more annoyed by the chicken falling than any actual pain. Don, feeling particularly cheeky, reached over and picked up the fallen piece of chicken. "Still good," he said with a grin before taking a bite. "Hey!" Summer's voice was filled with indignation as she stared at him in disbelief. "That was mine. Give me one of your pieces to make up for it." "Nope," Don replied, enjoying the taste of the chicken and the sauce as he licked his fingers. The words were barely out of his mouth when Summer tackled him, her body crashing into his with unexpected force. The impact sent them both sprawling onto the floor, their plates clattering to the side as they wrestled for dominance. Don was momentarily caught off guard by her sudden aggression, but he quickly recovered, grabbing hold of her wrists to try and keep her from pinching him back. They rolled together, the plush carpet cushioning their fall as they fought for control. Despite the razzing, Don couldn't help but notice the intimacy of their position. Summer was practically lying on top of him, her face just inches from his, her breath coming in short, angry bursts. Her hair, which had been neatly in place earlier, now fell around them like a curtain, creating a small, private space where it was just the two of them. But Summer, too focused on her goal of getting one of Don's pieces of chicken, seemed completely oblivious to the closeness of their situation. "You're such a thief!" she exclaimed, her voice a mix of frustration and determination. "Give it back." Don grinned, knowing full well he wasn't going to make it easy for her. "You'll have to pry it from my cold, dead hands," he teased, his voice laced with mock seriousness. Summer narrowed her eyes, clearly up for the challenge. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth, as she wiggled her wrists free from his grasp and lunged for his plate. But Don was quicker. He used their tangled position to his advantage, rolling them both over so that he was the one pinning her to the floor. This time, Summer let out a small gasp of surprise as her back hit the carpet, but she quickly regained her composure, glaring up at him with fierce determination. "Not so fast," Don said, his voice low as he held her wrists above her head, making it impossible for her to reach the plate. For a moment, they were both still, their playful wrestling match giving way to a short silence. Don could feel the rapid rise and fall of her chest against his, the warmth of her body seeping through their clothes. But then Summer, ever the fighter, broke the silence with a sharp kick to his shin. "Ow!" Don exclaimed, momentarily losing his grip on her wrists as he recoiled from the pain. Summer took advantage of his distraction, freeing her hands and pushing him off her with a grunt of effort. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing the nearest piece of chicken from his plate and holding it up triumphantly. "Ha!" she declared, her voice filled with victory. "Serves you right." Don couldn't help but laugh as he rolled onto his back, looking up at her with amusement. All right, you win," he conceded, having achieved his goal and no longer wanting to fight over a piece of meat. Summer, now standing over him with her prize in hand, finally seemed to notice the intimate position they had been in just moments before. Her cheeks flushed a deep red as she quickly looked away, pretending to inspect the piece of chicken she had claimed. "You are broken bar right," she muttered, clearly flustered. "Better eat this before you try to steal it again." Don grinned as he sat up, rubbing his shin where she had kicked him. "You're lucky I'm too sore to retaliate," he joked, though in truth, he was more than happy to let her have this victory. He knew that in the grand scheme of things, it was the better option. Summers gave him a half-hearted glare before sitting back down, her earlier bravado now replaced with a slightly embarrassed expression. Yeah, she mumbled, still avoiding his gaze. They both resumed eating, though the atmosphere had shifted once again. The earlier playfulness had given way to a more subdued, almost awkward silence. Don could tell Summer was still processing what had just happened, and he decided to give her some space, focusing on his food instead. But inwardly, he was already thinking of other ways to engage with her. Don didn't let the awkward silence settle for long. He could feel the atmosphere shifting, and he knew if they didn't keep talking, things might get even weirder. So, he decided to change the subject. Though, in hindsight, he wasn't sure if this was the best direction to take. "So, how come you're not out with a boyfriend like most girls your age?" Don asked, trying to keep his tone casual as he picked up another piece of chicken. Summer froze mid-bite, her fork hovering just inches from her mouth. Her eyes flickered with hesitation, and instead of answering, she deflected. "Why are you asking me that?" Don shrugged, acting nonchalant. "Just curious. I mean, as much of a pain in the ass as you are, you're not ugly or anything. So, I'm wondering why." Summer narrowed her eyes at him, clearly not amused by his choice of words. "Not ugly? Seriously?" "I'm hot, Donnie." "Incredibly so." Don rolled his eyes, smirking. "Confidence is important," he said sarcastically, though there was a playful edge to his voice. Summer huffed, crossing her arms as she leaned back against the bed frame. "Just for that, I'm not telling you. Don shrugged again, taking another bite of his food. Your choice, he replied, not pushing the matter any further. He could tell she wasn't ready to talk about it, and the last thing he wanted was to make her too uncomfortable. They both continued eating in silence, the only sound in the room coming from the music still playing in the background. Just as Don was about to comment on the song, the next track came on and it was a drastic change in mood. The beat was slow, sultry, and the lyrics were anything but subtle. Touch me slowly, let me feel you crawl, whisper my name as you take it to a broken bar. Summer's eyes widened in horror as the words filled the room. Without thinking, she practically dove for her phone, clearly desperate to change the song. But Don was quicker, grabbing the phone just before she could reach it. Give it back, she demanded, her voice laced with embarrassment as she tried to snatch the phone from his hands. Don held it just out of the reach, a teasing smile on his lips. Relax, I just wanted to see the title, he said, turning the phone so he could read the screen. Huh. Bedroom eyes and thighs. Interesting taste you've got there, Summer. Summer's face flushed a deep red, and she lunged for the phone again, this time managing to knock it out of Don's hand. It hit the floor with a soft thud, and before either of them could react, a podcast began playing automatically. And welcome back to another episode of Whispers in the Dark, where we explore the steamiest fantasies and how to bring them to life in your own bedroom. A broken bar. Summer's face, already red, turned an even deeper shade as she dove for the phone, quickly exiting the app and silencing the podcast. She clutched the phone to her chest, glaring at Don with a mixture of anger and mortification. Don, trying his best not to laugh, looked away and held up his hands. I didn't see or hear anything, he said, though the smirk on his face suggested otherwise. Summer wasn't buying it. You better not tell anyone about this, or you're dead, she threatened, her voice deadly serious as she glared at him. Don grinned, clearly enjoying the power shift. I don't know, a broken bar, I might risk it. Seeing the mischievous glint in his eyes, Summer's panic increased. She rushed to block the door, planting herself firmly in his path. Don't you fucking dare, Donnie, she warned, her eyes narrowing dangerously. Don's smile only widened as he saw how desperate she was. He couldn't help but find the whole situation amusing, though he knew he had to tread carefully. What's it worth to you? He asked, leaning casually against the wall as he crossed his arms, clearly savoring the moment. Summer's eyes widened with worry as she tried to gauge how serious he was. She bit her lip as she considered her options. What, a broken bar? What will it take for you to forget this ever happened? Don pretended to think it over, even tapping his chin in a contemplative manner. Well, this is an interesting opportunity, he muttered, his voice thoughtful as he watched her squirm. Summer crossed her arms defensively, her foot tapping anxiously on the carpet. Come on, Donnie, this isn't funny, she insisted, though there was a note of pleading in her voice. Just tell me what you want, and I'll do it. Don raised an eyebrow, pretending to be surprised by her offer. You'd really do anything? Summer hesitated, clearly not liking where this was going, but she nodded nonetheless. Just a broken bar, don't tell anyone, okay? This is embarrassing enough as it is. Don couldn't help but feel a little bad for Hera, just a little. He hadn't meant to push her this far, but now that they were here, he couldn't resist taking advantage of the situation. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. All right, I'll make you a deal. Summer's eyes locked onto his, clearly desperate to hear what he was going to say. What's the deal? Don smirked, taking his time before answering. You have to be nice to me for an entire week. No insults, no hitting, no making fun of me, and a broken bar. You have to let me pick the music tomorrow. Summer's mouth fell open in disbelief. That's it? That's all you want? Don nodded, looking entirely too pleased with himself. That's it. I think it's a fair trade, don't you? Summer blinked, clearly not expecting the terms to be so broken bar reasonable. She had been bracing herself for something much worse. After a moment, she let out a sigh of relief and nodded. Fine. You've got yourself a deal. Don extended his hand, and with only a brief hesitation, Summer shook it, sealing the agreement. In truth, Don couldn't pick anything too absurd or weird, as he knew Summer wouldn't agree and it would only hurt their relationship. So instead, Why not use it as a chance to show that even when given the opportunity to be in a position of power over her, he wouldn't abuse it?